Chapter 90. Sure enough, as soon as Wu Yin finished speaking, not only Yun Yi, but also some of the classmates around them could hear Wu Yin's strong hostility towards Yun Yi. They all showed a trace of embarrassment. Wu Yin did not give up. He smiled evilly and did not feel that he had just set anything overboard. Instead, he added fuel to the fire and said to Yun Yi in a charitable tone, forget it. I think Yun Yi, I'll pay for your red packets." As he spoke, Wu Yin took out a leather wallet from his trouser pocket and took out 3 red Grandpa Mao notes from the wallet. When he did this, he deliberately paid attention to the gazes of the group of people around him. He put on airs as if he was superior to others. "Wow, Wu Yin, is the wallet in your hand made of real leather? It's so cool. This style hasn't been sold in the market yet." At this time, a boy in the group with big glasses sighed. The boy's words made Wu Yin even more proud. Wu Yin held the 3 cute Grandpa Mao notes in his hand. He was not in a hurry to use it to humiliate Yun Yi. Instead, he boasted even more. Now, the way he looked at others changed. "This wallet was a birthday gift from my uncle this year. It was imported from France." As he said this, Wu Yin raised his head proudly and showed off. As he spoke, Wu Yin turned to look at Yun Yi. He looked at him with a charitable gaze and handed the 3 Grandpa Mao notes to Yun Yi. "Take it. You don't have to return it." His tone was very domineering. It was as if the 300 yuan was nothing in his eyes. He used it to highlight his family's strong foundation. Yun Yi clenched his fist. Seeing Wu Yin humiliate him like this, he almost raised his fist and punched him. But he held back. "Take the money back. We don't need it." Yun Yi gritted his teeth. Their family was poor, but even if they were poor with dignity. Hey, Yun Yi. I was kind enough to help you out. Why don't you appreciate it?" Wu Yin pursed his lips and even accused Yun Yi, saying that he was ungrateful. Yun Yi's face darkened. Yun Jian saw her brother being bullied by Wu Yin. Naturally, she would not sit by and do nothing. Snake. Lizard, who was standing behind Yun Jian, finally understood the whole story. She remained silent and waited for Yun Jian's instructions. "You want to give a red packet if you stay for dinner, right?" Yun Jian blinked, replacing Yun Yi Wu Yin. "Everyone is prepared to give it to you. You can't just give it to the white sheep empty-handed, right? Little girl, your brother hasn't accepted my goodwill yet. Why don't you hold on to this money for him?" Wu Chang waved the 3 red banknotes in his hand and told Yun Jian boastfully. To Wu Qiao, he only had one goal, to embarrass Yun Yi. The rest of the process was not important. It was apparent that Wu Qiao had thought of her as a girl who came from a poor family and was greedy for money. "Of course we want to give a red packet." Yun Jian smiled at Wu Yin, revealing a row of neat white teeth. Wu Yin thought that Yun Jian had taken the bait. He quickly handed the 300 yuan used to humiliate Yun Yi to Yun Jian. At the same time, he looked at Yun Yi with disdain. "Then take it quickly." He subconsciously thought that Yun Yi's family did not have the financial means to take out 300 yuan at once. Yun Jian suddenly stopped smiling. Her expression suddenly became cold. She turned her head slightly, not looking at Wu Yin and the others' expressions. She turned her head to look at Snake. Lizard's bag, then turned her head to look at Wu Yin and the others. "How can a red packet of 100 yuan be enough? Shouldn't you at least give 1,000 yuan?" As she spoke, Yun Jian called Snake. "Lizard. Lizard. Snake." Lizard had been by Yun Jian's side for so long, how could she not know what Yun Jian meant? Snake. Lizard obeyed and opened her bag, taking out 3 stacks of red 100 yuan notes. Snake. Lizard had the habit of keeping cash in her bag. Yun Jian was naturally aware of this. Seeing everyone's shocked and frightened expressions, and then thinking of her brother's awkward face when he was bullied and did not know how to fight back, Yun Jian could no longer hold back. Even if she could not tell Qin Yuru the truth, she had to let her brother know something. Yun Jian looked at Wu Yin, who was holding the 300 yuan notes in shock, and sneered, 1,000 each, no need to return. Chapter 91. 3 thick stacks of red notes meant 30,000 yuan. Moreover, the money came from Snake. Lizard's purse. In other words, Snake. Lizard's purse was filled to the brim with cash. Prices were low in this day and age. It was already impressive for a student like Wu Qiao to be able to fork out 100 yuan. At the very least, the parents of these students were high-ranking officials or entrepreneurs. They could fork out 100 yuan, but 1,000 yuan was not a small sum. 1,000 yuan was enough for a normal family to live for a long time. Therefore, everyone present was dumbfounded when they saw the scene just now, their eyes nearly falling out of their sockets. Yun Yi was poor, so was his younger sister. Why would his sister's friend have so much money in her purse? More importantly, why had Snake? Lizard obeyed Yun Jian's command just like that? Xiao Jianyu. Yun Yi's eyes widened as she stared at Yun Jian and Snake. Lizard behind her in disbelief. His younger sister was getting more mysterious. Mysterious skills, mysterious friends. Why was it that he could not see through her anymore? They were siblings who grew up together, but Yun Yi froze on the spot as if it was his first time meeting Yun Jian. Yun Jian cast a reassuring look at Yun Yi without explaining anything. Wuxia, on the other hand, felt like running away. His palms were sweating as he gripped the 3 notes in his hand that he thought he could humiliate Yun Yi. Looking at the 3 stacks of cash in Snake Lizard's hand, he felt defeated. Now that he thought about it, how ridiculous was his action just now. It was then that a male voice that eased the awkward atmosphere rang. "Yeah, everyone's here already. Come upstairs quickly, we're waiting for you guys." As the voice faded, Su Hao Cole, who was dressed in a flashy suit, came down the spiral staircase. His tall and muscular physique was as handsome as Yun Yi's. Su Hao Cole was stunned when he saw Yun Jian before he ran to Yun Jian under everyone's surprised gazes and looked at her with admiration. "Yini Mimi, you're here too. Come, take a seat. I'm so happy that you're here for my birthday celebration today." Su Hao's actions caused everyone present to be even more shocked. This girl was valued by Su Hao Cole now? Combined with the scene just now, it seemed that this girl was not simple at all. Yun Yi's younger sister was not simple, not ordinary. Yun Jian smiled at Su Hao Cole and returned to her usual demeanor. Then she pointed at the 3 stacks of bills in Su Hao Cole's hands and said, "This money is the red packet that everyone prepared for you." She really dared to give it to him? That was a total of 30,000 yuan. The group of people thought that Yun Jian wanted to avenge her brother, so she took out 30,000 yuan. However, they did not expect that she really intended to give it to him. 30,000 yuan, this was not a joke. This. Su Hao Cole glanced at it and was shocked. "Take it." Yun Jian winked at Su Hao Cole and said. Su Hao Cole, who did not understand the situation, really thought that it was a red packet from his classmates. He thought that his classmates were really generous this time, so he accepted the red packets without any embarrassment. At this moment, Wu Kuang's expression was the ugliest. After all, he was the one who suggested this. The classmates present were not short of money. Even if they really had to give 1,000 yuan, although it was a little too much, it would still give them face. Chapter 92. Yun Yi's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he stopped himself. In the end, Su Hao Cole gathered everyone on the 2nd floor and seated them at the hot pot table in the VIP private room. There were about a dozen round hot pot tables in the VIP private room, and each table could seat about 10 people. It was obvious that Su Hao Cole had reserved the entire place. Of course, only 2 to 3 hot pot tables were taken after everyone was seated. The remaining tables were used for other purposes. Yun Jian was sitting on the left of her brother Yun Yi, while Snake Lizard was on her right. Su Hao Cole was sitting beside Yun Yi. All 4 of them were seated close to each other at the same table. "The dishes are ordered. I've told the waiter that our table will be served first. My dad's business friends will be here later. Don't be shy, then we can talk among ourselves." Su Hao Cole spoke to his rowdy classmates after he sat down. To outsiders, Su Hao Cole's family was rich and powerful, and his father was a businessman. However, Yun Jian knew that Su Hao Cole was the son of Longmen City's top mafia boss. As for the friends of my father's business that he mentioned, he was probably referring to the people in that circle. Su Hao Cole's father was obviously using his son's birthday party as an excuse to invite his peers or people who were useful to him to the gathering and build a better relationship with these people. After all, if a gang wanted to survive, they needed to develop over a long period of time. They couldn't just rely on themselves. They could not rely on themselves alone, especially when important matters were involved, such as a large-scale mafia fight. Even the police officers in the police station had to build a good relationship with them. Otherwise, if someone in the mafia killed someone or there was a mafia fight, the police officers were not idiots. How could they not do anything when they knew about it and let the mafia do whatever they wanted? Yun Yi was also aware of his good friend's identity, but he chose to keep quiet. From the moment he and Su Hao Cole became brothers, they would not taunt each other because of each other's identity. After a while, the dishes were served. The waiter served the dishes one by one, and the group of people ate happily. After all, eating at the Golden Sparkle Hotel was very expensive. Even if most of the people present had a good foundation, it was impossible for them to eat here often. Otherwise, wouldn't he be broke from eating? Yun Jian sat in her seat and picked the big and fat meat to eat. Her stamina couldn't keep up, so she had to eat more energy. Simply running wasn't enough strength anymore. Slow down, Xiaojian. No one's fighting with you. Seeing this, Yunyi smiled handsomely and reached out to wipe off the meat residue on his sister's mouth. Ha, Mayor Gu, this way please. At this moment, a loud male voice came from the door. Then a group of middle-aged men in their 30s and 40s walked into the room. Standing at the very front were two middle-aged men dressed in formal attire. The people who came in later also greeted them politely. This group of people didn't look ordinary. They obviously treated today as a gathering to make connections and expand their influence. The greeting of Mayor Gu attracted everyone's attention. Mayor Gu? Wasn't that Longmen City's mayor? Such a big shot was here too. Looking at the people who came in later, each of them had an imposing aura and looked like people who were destined for great things. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and turned to look at Snake. Lizard. Snake. Lizard's lips were pressed together when she saw the first middle-aged man who came in. The middle-aged man was none other than the man who was talking to Snake. Lizard when Yun Jian found her downstairs. What was more amazing was that Su Hao Cole went to the middle-aged man and called out, Dad. The middle-aged man was Su Hao Cole's father, the boss of Longmen City's top mafia group, Su Zetian. Chapter 93. The man standing next to Su Zetian was Mayor Gu. Mayor Gu was the mayor of Longmen City. His official position was one of the highest in the entire city and his political status in Longmen City was extraordinary as well. As a mafia boss, it was not surprising that Su Zetian had dealings with people from the government. Yun Jian narrowed his eyes as he watched Su Zetian and the others coming in. Su Zetian did not see Snake, Lizard and Yun Jian at all. He was smiling and nodding at his son, Su Hao Cole, before following Mayor Gu into the private room to sit at an empty hot pot table. The others followed suit and sat at the empty seats around them. These people were high-ranking officials, triads, or business tycoons. Their social status was not low. They knew how to blend into the environment quickly and find companions who could benefit them, building a closer relationship and seeking cooperation that was mutually beneficial. This was the purpose of their gathering. They were not really here to celebrate Su Zetian's son, Su Hao Cole's birthday. Su Hao Cole was more or less disappointed that his father did not even wish him a happy birthday. Even his birthday party was a pretense to expand his influence. It was the same every year, but when he was filled with anticipation and was disappointed again and again, it was like a beloved toy being cruelly smashed in front of him and he was helpless to do anything about it. Su Hao Cole could only bury his emotions deep down to prevent others from noticing his predicament. Happy birthday. It was at this juncture that Yun Yi seemed to have noticed Su Hao Cole's mournful gaze. He placed his slender hand on Su Hao Cole's broad shoulder to comfort Su Hao Cole. Happy birthday. With Yun Yi taking the lead, everyone present congratulated Su Hao Cole after hearing it. Su Hao Cole pursed his thin lips. His voice became a little hoarse and the gratitude in his eyes was genuine. Thank you everyone. All right. We're all old classmates. There's no need to thank me. It's what I should do. Someone mumbled. His words moved Su Hao Cole even more. Yun Jian also followed the trend and shouted, Happy birthday, to Su Hao Cole. However, her attention was actually focused on Su Zetian. Snake. Lizard had explained Su Zetian's identity to her, including why Snake. Lizard had met Su Zetian. Yun Jian did not expect Su Zetian to be a member of the kosher mercenaries. However, Su Zetian's influence in the kosher mercenaries was very small. Just like the members of the kosher mercenaries were scattered all over the world, there were at least a few 100,000 of them. Furthermore, this group of people was divided into different groups. For example, the intelligence team, the assassination team, the investigation team, and so on. Su Zetian was merely a small force of the kosher mercenaries in Longmen City. As the boss of the kosher mercenaries in her past life, Yun Jian had left everything to Tiger, Leopard and Snake, Lizard to manage. It was only natural that she did not know of Su Zetian's existence. Although Su Zetian was a member of the kosher mercenaries, if he wanted to meet Yun Jian, it would be like an ordinary person meeting the country's president in her past life. Who knew that Yun Jian would end up in Longmen City after going around in circles one day? The wine glass in Su Zetian's hand that was sitting not far away suddenly fell to the ground with a bang and shattered into pieces. His calm demeanor when he was conversing with Mayor Gu crumbled instantly. It was because Su Zetian had just looked up when he saw Snake. Lizard. Terrified, he abandoned Mayor Gu and walked over to her under everyone's gaze. Everyone was shocked that Su Zetian would abandon the influential Mayor Gu and walk over to a woman. What was he doing? Su Zetian asked Snake. Lizard carefully, you're here too? Why didn't you say anything? Do you want to sit over there? Who was this woman? How could she be more dignified than Mayor Gu? Everyone was shocked, including Mayor Gu himself. Snake. Lizard then turned to look at Yun Jian, waiting for Yun Jian's opinion. With that, everyone's gaze was focused on Yun Jian. Chapter 94. I'll sit with my brother. Yun Jian did not look up. Wiping her mouth, she smiled faintly and stuffed another mouthful of fatty meat into her mouth. Snake. Lizard turned to look at Su Zetian when she heard Yun Jian. You don't have to mind us. It was only then that Su Zetian noticed Yun Jian. Yun Jian had her hair tied in a high ponytail. Although she was dressed plainly, she exuded the aura of a ruler. Was this not the girl he met downstairs not long ago? He thought she had gone to the wrong place and asked her to stay away. What was the situation now though? Snake. Lizard was a high-ranking member of the Kosha mercenaries. Su Zetian had no right to know her exact position. He only knew that Snake. Lizard held an extraordinary position in the Kosha mercenaries. Even so, Su Zetian could only admire Snake. Lizard's status. Now, even someone like Snake. Lizard had to lower her head in front of Yun Jian. Who was this little girl? Su Zetian knew that Snake. Lizard was the highest-ranking member of the Kosha mercenaries. His legs would have turned to jelly from shock. If he knew that the seemingly harmless Yun Jian was the biggest boss of the Kosha mercenaries, he would have fainted and been sent to the hospital. However, Su Zetian did not know. Such was the way of the world. Su Zetian was the boss of the top mafia group in Longmen City, a big shot who could do anything he wanted. However, he did not even know who the biggest boss of the Kosha mercenaries was. All right. Su Zetian could only wipe his slippery lips and bow to Yun Jian and Snake. Lizard before he slowly walked back to Mayor Gu, his body tense. Wow, Yuni, your sister's friend knows Su Haoko's father? Once Su Zetian left, a girl sitting at the same table asked Yuni with a surprised gaze, obviously trying to strike up a conversation with Yuni. Yuni was very popular in the class, especially the girls. They all liked her. Moreover, Yuni was a sincere and gentle person. I don't know. Yuni awkwardly glanced at Yun Jian and Snake. Lizard trying to change the topic. He wanted to know why Xiao Jian's friend knew Zhi's father too. Others might not know, but Yuni knew very well that Su Haoko's father was not a model businessman, but a mafia boss. Xiao Jian's friend knew the mafia boss, and most importantly, the boss was respectful toward her. Even when he was chatting with a big shot like Mayor Gu, he could actually abandon it and come over to greet him first. At the moment, Yun Jian, who was the source of everyone's suspicion, was sitting in her seat and devouring the plate of meat in front of her. Burp. Just as everyone stared at Yun Jian eagerly, hoping to hear some explanation from Yun Jian burped out of the blue. I'm full. Yun Jian rubbed her tummy and returned a sweet smile to the group. The smiles on everyone's faces instantly stiffened. There was no doubt that a wave of shock washed over them. Was there no explanation? After a hearty meal and dinner, the sky was already dark and gloomy. No one was in a hurry to go home. Su Haokol suggested with a chuckle, why don't we go play at the new arcade for a while? I heard that there's a new gun simulation game there. It looks just like a real gun. As he spoke, Su Haokol turned to look at Yun Jian. Chapter 95. Sister Yuni, you should come too. Su Haokol suddenly stuck his head in front of Yun Jian and said with a cheeky smile. Yun Yi shifted his gaze to his sister as well. That day when Yun Jian killed the sniper, it scared him to death, but it was also a scene that he could not forget for a long time. Brother, are you going? Yun Jian asked Yun Yi. Su Haokol suddenly hugged Yun Yi's shoulder and rushed to speak for Yun Yi. Of course he is going. I'll go. Yun Jian did not hesitate this time and said directly. Su Haokol smiled. The reason why he suggested to experience the simulation game was because of Yun Jian. The way Yun Jian killed the sniper that day was simply the rhythm of a sharpshooter. Otherwise, he would not go to the arcade to experience the simulation game guns. After all, Su Haokol was someone who had a real gun. The simulation game guns were really not good enough. Other than Yun Jian and the others who wanted to go, Yun Yi's classmates chose to go home, especially Wu Bin. He had suffered in the hands of Yun Jian and had long wanted to leave. After waiting for a long time to finish eating, he ran away early in the morning with his tail between his legs. Snake. Lizard did not plan to go to the children's playground, so Yun Jian threw the keys to the Lamborghini that she borrowed from CE to her and asked her to drive the car away first and come back tomorrow to pick it up. Snake. Lizard responded, took the keys and turned to leave. After the group of people who left, there were more than a dozen people left. A few girls stayed because they wanted to have more contact with Yun Yi and Su Haokol. After all, Yun Yi and Su Hao Cole were the most handsome guys in school, so there were not many chances to interact with them. Let's walk along the street like this. It's not far from here, just around the corner of 2 streets. Su Hao Cole said as he pointed at the street ahead. I'm fine with anything. Yun Jian nodded. Just take it as a stroll. Su Hao Cole chuckled. Thus, the group strolled along the busy street. The city was beautiful at night. The area where Yun Jian was at was covered in neon lights, and there were many people coming and going. A night breeze blew. Autumn nights were always chilly. Yun Jian was wearing a short-sleeved shirt at the moment, so the cool breeze felt a little chilly as it blew through her skin. Yun Yi suddenly took off his jacket and draped it over Yun Jian, saying with a smile, Xiao Jian, put it on. Don't catch a cold. Yun Yi had always doted on his younger sister since they were young. Yun Jian paused. She was actually not cold. She had gone through all kinds of hardships in her past life, so the cool breeze was nothing to her. In spite of it, she felt warmth from the bottom of her heart as she could not help thinking of her younger brother in her past life. If her younger brother was still here, would he be as nice to her as he was now? Thank you, brother. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and did not return the jacket to Yun Yi. Instead, she wrapped it around her shoulders. Yun Yi smiled and ruffled Yun Jian's hair. Step by step, they arrived at the arcade in no time. The arcade was located on the 3rd floor of a skyscraper. Skyscrapers were not common in Longmen City in 1998. The construction of skyscrapers had just begun, so this place was considered the city center of Longmen City. It was the arcade on the 3rd floor. As Yun Jian and the group stepped into the arcade, they saw the big screen that showed a gun simulation game. It had the most people gathered in front of it, most of them teenagers. Chapter 96. While Su Hao Cole was exchanging the game coins, Yun Jian glanced around. If it wasn't for her brother Yun Yi coming here, Yun Jian wouldn't have come to this place. To Yun Jian, the shooting games here were too childish. The rain of bullets she experienced in her previous life wasn't any less than what was shown in the gun simulation game. I'm back. Su Hao Cole held a pile of game coins and ran back from the counter. Then Su Hao Cole divided the game coins equally among everyone. There were quite a few people standing in front of the gun-emulating game console. Because this game console was a new simulation game, even the guns were about the same weight as real guns. Although they were shooting at the big screen, the effect was quite similar to a real gun. The students of this era all wanted to try their hand at a gun, so there were a lot of people here to watch the shooting. There were also a lot of people playing the shooting game. Hey, it seems like we have to wait. There are too many people waiting to play the gun simulation game. Su Hao Cole touched his head and said, Boys were passionate about guns and racing, but girls were different. So in the group, except for Yun Jian, the other girls all went to play other games. For example, the claw machine, which was suitable for girls to play. At this time, in front of the gun simulation game, a group of young people shouted, Wow! They saw a man in his 20s standing in front of the gun simulation game. The man put away his gun and showed a triumphant smile. This gun game was to shoot at the target on the screen with a gun. Of course, this gun didn't have bullets, but it gave people a visual feeling of hitting the target on the screen. And besides the fact that there were no bullets, whether it was the feel of the gun or the simulation, it was first class. So when this game was released, it attracted a lot of young people who liked to play with guns. Wow, Brother Lei is amazing. No wonder he has touched a real gun. He knocked down 32 targets in 1 minute. A boy standing not far away bragged to the man holding the gun. It was as if he was afraid that people didn't know that this man in his 20s had touched a real gun. Sure enough, when they heard that the man called Brother Lei had touched a real gun, the surrounding people were so surprised that they gasped. Now Brother Lei was even more proud of himself. This is nothing. You haven't touched a real gun. There is a difference between a real gun and a toy gun. Brother Lei boasted. He was so proud that his nose was almost higher than his eyes. Are you done playing? Can you move aside if you are done? Su Hao Cole saw that Brother Lei's group had finished playing and didn't move aside, so he went forward and asked. At this moment, Brother Lei, who was still under everyone's admiring gazes, glared at Su Hao Cole fiercely. Where did you King brat come from? How dare you snatch my game console? Brother Lei clenched his fists and bumped them together. He looked like he was about to fight and showed off. He was very proud. It was as if he was saying, if you say one more word, I will beat you up. Su Hao Cole opened his mouth. He had only asked one question, but Brother Lei was already angry. Just when he was about to reply, Yun Jian spoke first and directly attacked his back. You only knocked down 32 targets in 1 minute. Your shooting moves are flashy and extremely gaudy. You should move aside. Everyone was stunned. They saw Yun Jian criticizing Brother Lei word by word. Every word she said hit his weak spot. Brother Lei's expression became worse. Chapter 97. Brother Lei's elder brother was a soldier in the army, so he was equipped with a pistol. Brother Lei had touched a real gun before, so he thought he was great. Especially when he was playing this kind of shooting game, he felt that he was already standing at the top, looking down on a group of kids who had never touched a real gun before. It was as if he had taken a big step forward. Moreover, this gun simulation game console had just been released. It was already very impressive that Brother Lei could hit 32 moving targets on the big screen in 1 minute. This was already the highest record in the history of this gun-playing game. However, just as Brother Lei was proudly bragging to his friends, Yun Jian suddenly interrupted, pointing at the part where he thought he was good, and degrading him to the point that he was worthless. How could Brother Lei take it? He didn't care whether Yun Jian was a girl or not. He shouted back at Yun Jian, "Where did you King brats come from? Do you know who I am? How dare you fight with me for the game? Diske, you must be tired of living, right?" After shouting a few words, Brother Lei pointed his finger at Yun Jian fiercely. "CK, do you think I need a little kid like you to tell me what to do with my shooting skills? Come and do it if you dare." Brother Lei often hung out at the arcade, and he was also a gangster in society. However, he was good at playing games, so he was respectfully called the king of games by the people in this circle. Therefore, Brother Lei subconsciously thought that he was the king of the gaming circle. As long as it was a game that he had played, he would always be the one who set the highest record. That was why he dared to say something like, "Come at me if you can," to Yun Jian so brazenly. He didn't believe that this little girl who was still wet behind the ears could beat him. The few boys in Yun Yi's class saw the situation, and they all looked worried. They didn't expect that Su Haokol and Yun Jian would fight with them as soon as they called the arcade. More importantly, Brother Lei looked ferocious. He didn't look like someone to be trifled with. What should he do now? At this moment, Yun Jian grinned. She was not intimidated by Brother Lei's ferocious look at all. Instead, she curled her lips and smiled at Brother Lei in disdain. "All right, I'll do it. Move aside." Not only was Yun Jian not frightened by Brother Lei, but she was also going to greet him. Everyone on Brother Lei's side was stunned. Brother Lei was also stunned. He looked at Yun Jian again. He saw that Yun Jian was dressed in clean clothes. Although it looked like it was bought from a street stall, from her eyes and temperament, he could see a trace of extraordinariness. Was it an illusion? Brother Lei shook his head. She was just a little girl who liked to flaunt her superiority. Come. I'll let you do it." "Little brat, it's not that I want to bully you, but just based on what you said just now, if you don't hit as many targets as I do this round, then you better strip naked and kneel in front of my brothers." Brother Lei growled in exasperation and threatened. "Xiao Jian, don't." Yuni panicked. She panicked when she saw her younger sister getting into a fight with Brother Lei, who was obviously a hooligan. These hooligans are capable of doing anything. Before Yun could shout, however, she was held back by Su Haokol. Believe your younger sister. Don't you want to see your younger sister's limit?" Su Haokol told Yun softly, looking at Yun Jian. This simulation game console could test a person's marksmanship, which was why Su Haokol wanted to lure Yun Jian here. He wanted to know how good Yun Jian's marksmanship was since she could kill a sniper instead. Yun Jian smiled in a way that sent chills down one's spine. She told Brother Lei faintly, "I'll cripple one of your hands after I win." She would not forgive anyone who insulted her verbally. How arrogant. Chapter 98. Brother Lei smirked deviously, his gaze already scanning Yun Jian from head to toe as if he was certain that Yun Jian would lose and was already fantasizing about her naked body. "Then we'll talk about it after you win me?" Brother Lei glanced at Yun Jian condescendingly with a smirk. How could Brother Lei take Yun Jian's threat seriously? Even Brother Lei's buddies would not take Yun Jian's words seriously. What a joke. How could Brother Lei lose to an underage girl? Therefore, they could not wait to see Yun Jian lose and beg for mercy, only to be stripped naked by them. Brother Lei and his gang had done this many times. They were all gangsters in the society. What had they not done before? They would snatch any woman they fancied. If they could not get their hands on her, they would rape her, drug her, and force themselves on her. Did they not subdue her in the end? Everyone knew that Yun Jian was pretty. In fact, when Yun Jian and Brother Lei were at loggerheads in the beginning, Brother Lei's buddies had been eyeing Yun Jian. That was why Yun was anxious. How could he pretend that he did not know that his younger sister was being eyed around by Brother Lei and his gang? "Come on, little girl. Why aren't you here yet? Don't tell me you're too scared to come? One of Brother Lei's buddies could not help urging when he saw that Yun Jian had yet to go to the game console. Yun Jian smirked coldly and tossed a small pile of tokens in her palm into the air before catching them handsomely. She then took out another token with her other hand and passed the rest to Yun Yi. Brother, hold these for me, Yun Jian told Yun Yi. Xiao Jian, don't force yourself. Yun Yi bit his lip and said worriedly. Although Yun Jian had killed the sniper that day as her brother, he was still worried about his sister. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and smiled. Her heart felt warm. It felt good to have someone backing him up. Before Yun Jian went over to the console, she turned her head to look at Su Haokol, revealing a row of white and clean front teeth. Watch carefully. After saying that, Yun Jian walked towards the game console. Su Haojia, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. Yun Jian actually knew why he brought her here? Su Haokol just whispered to Yun Yi, but he didn't expect that Yun Jian already knew. That was why she told him, watch carefully, before she left. Su Haokol felt his cheeks heat up at once, feeling embarrassed to be exposed by Yun Jian. Come to think of it, it was no big deal. He just wanted to know how good her marksmanship was. There was nothing wrong with that. While Su Haokol was thinking about it, Yun Jian was not in a hurry to insert the game token. Instead, she lifted the toy sniper rifle in front of her and weighed it in her hand. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but be stunned. What was she doing? Yun Jian was checking the difference between the game sniper rifle's configuration and a real one. She weighed the coin in her hand for a moment before stuffing it into the slot of the game console. A string of English words appeared on the screen of the game console. The translated Chinese subtitles read, "The shooting battle begins." The game had begun. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Everyone held their breaths. Then, on the screen of the console, the targets moved from the side. As the target moved, a series of neat and orderly gunshots were heard from the speakers of the game console. Chapter 99. Everyone knew how to hold the imitation gun and pull the trigger with one hand to fire the bullets. This was especially true for this kind of simulation game. Usually, players could pull the trigger and fire at the big screen at will. There was also a chance of hitting the target. To put it bluntly, even a fool could do such a simple operation. Unless someone was so stupid that they didn't even know where to pull the trigger. However, whether or not the bullets could hit the moving targets on the big screen was another matter altogether. When Yun Jian pulled the trigger, she was like an ordinary person who kept shooting at the big screen. This wasn't a big deal. However, what caught everyone's attention was the bang 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 sound of the bullets being fired. Every time there was a sound, a target was hit. A series of fast-moving targets that no one would be able to shoot in time were all hit by Yun Jian's gun without missing a single one. If an ordinary person were to shoot at the targets that appeared one after another, it was estimated that by the time they aimed at the target on the left and shot the target on the left, the targets on the right would have already disappeared. In other words, they would have failed to shoot and missed the targets. Despite that, it was as if Yun Jian had already known the locations of the targets that appeared one after another with each shot. Every shot hit a target accurately. She actually reached the point where she didn't miss a single target. 30, 31, 32, 33. She has already hit 33 targets. Someone shouted out uncontrollably. His whole body was boiling with excitement. At this time, less than 10 seconds had passed since the 1-minute shooting competition started. In less than 10 seconds, Yun Jian had already hit 33 targets and successfully overtaken Brother Lei. And now she was still shooting. God. Since Yun Jian started shooting, everyone had been disdainful at the beginning. Then they were suddenly surprised, and now they were all pale with fright. Even some people behind couldn't help but start shouting and shouting. Brother Lei's face was very ugly. If he could still be said to be able to look down on Yun Jian a few seconds ago, then his expression now was as if he had been beaten up. He was so embarrassed. Yun Yi's emotions started to fluctuate. At this time, Su Haokol was forcefully suppressing his emotions and the shock that was about to burst out. He trembled as he counted the targets on the big screen that were shot by Yun Jian one by one. No matter how exaggerated the emotions of the people around her were, the girl who was kneeling in front of the game console with one leg in a standard shooting position was not affected at all. Her finger quickly pulled the trigger, sweeping the targets on the big screen with the speed of a rain of bullets. When the game ended, the 4 big words and a string of numbers that appeared on the screen brought everyone's emotions to the climax. On the big screen, 6 big red words popped out, highest record. Below the words in white letters, 203. Yun Jian hit 203 targets in 1 minute. Oh my god. Did I see it wrong? Guns to play to shoot. This girl is so cool. Did you see her shooting posture just now? She's so cool. Some of the boys who were naturally fond of guns almost jumped up in excitement when they saw this scene. Brother Lei, who had shot 32 targets in 1 minute, was already very good. But what about Yun Jian? She had hit 203 targets in 1 minute. How could they compete with such results? Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter. Didn't you see that? She didn't miss a single bullet just now. This girl must be a sharpshooter. The audience was in an uproar, which even attracted the attention of a group of people who were playing other games. At this time, Yun Jian, who had gently put down the imitation gun in her hand, stood up and walked towards Brother Lei with a smile. Chapter 100. Brother Lei thought that Yun Jian was joking. Who would have thought that she really wanted to cripple his hand? Was she joking? No matter what, Brother Lei and his gang were all ruffians and gangsters in the society. Fighting with others was something that they often did. Brother Lei had planned to stop today. After all, he was in the wrong. However, Yun Jian dared to say that. Hence, out of his pride as a man, Brother Lei's expression changed. He looked at Yun Jian and scolded, F***ck, whose hand do you want to cripple? Just based on a bunch of scrawny little brats like you? You want to fight, right? Was there going to be a gang fight? Hearing that Brother Lei was angry, some of the people who were watching the show were afraid of being implicated. They quickly took a few steps back. It was true that the young lady had won, but Brother Lei and his gang were not people who kept their word. More importantly, Brother Lei's group of brothers had never lost to anyone in a fight. Moreover, Brother Lei had someone backing him up. Rumor had it that Brother Lei had brought a group of people who called themselves brothers and beat up a person until he was completely paralyzed and could not take care of himself for the rest of his life. Later, although this group of people was taken away by the police, they were released safely in less than half a day. What else could it be other than having someone backing him up? Someone kindly reminded Yun Jian, "Young lady, hurry up and leave. Don't force yourself." Brother Lei obviously heard the murmurs of the people around him. He seemed to be in a better position. His pair of malicious eyes stared at Yun Jian's face. Then he smiled evilly and said, "But, if you apologize to me and accompany me tonight, I will forgive you." The way he addressed himself as brother made Yun Jian feel even more disgusted with Brother Lei and his gang. "I only want one of your hands." Yun Jian smiled. Although there was a smile on her face, it was a fake one. What? Brother Lei seemed to have not heard what Yun Jian said. He was shocked again. He thought to himself that this young girl must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts. He had given her face, but not only did she not back down, she even wanted to confront him head-on? Su Hao Cole, who was watching from the side, didn't say anything. He didn't want to help Yun Jian either. He was the son of Longmen City's mafia boss. If this identity was revealed, Brother Lei and the rest could only beg for mercy. However, Su Hao Cole narrowed his eyes and watched. He wanted to know how Yun Jian would deal with this matter. Yun Yi was unable to stand in front of Yun Jian due to Su Hao Cole's tug, but he knew that Zhe would definitely step in if Xiao Jian did not have the ability to handle Brother Lei and his gang, so he was less worried. This young lady's marksmanship is accurate, but isn't she digging her own grave by challenging Brother Lei? The people around saw this and couldn't help but mutter. Such a good girl is going to be defiled by Brother Lei. The surrounding crowd avoided Brother Lei's ears and made a commotion. So what if Yun Jian was a sharpshooter? To them, even if she was a sharpshooter, she would still be in trouble when she went up against a rascal like Brother Lei. Left hand. Yun Jian studied Brother Lei, not intimidated by his intimidating aura at all. What? Brother Lei was even more confused. It was not only Brother Lei who was confused, everyone else was equally confused. What left hand? Yun Jian had already taken 2 large strides toward Brother Lei. Then her movements were simple and extremely fast. Before Brother Lei and his gang could react, Yun Jian's hand was as nimble as a snake as it coiled around Brother Lei's left wrist. Crack. There was a crisp sound of bone breaking. Before Brother Lei could react, Yun Jian was already in front of him and his left arm was broken by Yun Jian. Excruciating pain shot through his body as Brother Lei cried out in agony. My hand. The entire process took less than 3 seconds. The group was stunned as their gazes landed on the devil who was all smiles but could break a person's arm with a smile. The girl grinned innocently and said, "He pointed at me with his left hand just now." Chapter 101. The crowd, who had thought that Yun Jian was a pretty, thin and weak girl, looked at Yun Jian in disbelief. Their eyes were wide open. How was this girl thin and weak? Just because Brother Lei pointed his finger at her, she crippled one of his hands. Such a domineering way of doing things made everyone extremely shocked. She was a demon that was 10 times scarier than Brother Lei. Yun Jian narrowed her beautiful eyes. She glanced sideways at Brother Lei and his gang, who were staring at her. She smirked and said provocatively, "Why aren't you leaving? Do you want to roll on the ground like him?" As she spoke, she pointed at Brother Lei, who was rolling on the ground in pain, and smiled like a flower. When Brother Lei's buddies heard what Yun Jian said, and with Brother Lei as a precedent, they felt chills running down their spines when they looked at Yun Jian's smirk again. How would they dare to stay there? Hence, the group of people lifted Brother Lei, who was rolling on the ground in pain, and disappeared from the spot at lightning speed. The 2 men who carried Brother Lei out of the room were almost tripped by the door because they were in a hurry. They managed to dodge the door and ran faster than a monkey. The group of people who were watching the show laughed loudly. Who would have thought that Brother Lei and his gang would be the ones who ran away in the end? Yun Jian's eyes lit up. She turned to look at Yun Yi and the rest and asked, "Do you guys still want to play games?" Everyone instantly shook their heads like waves. What a joke. With a godly sharpshooter like Yun Jian as a foil, wouldn't they be looking for trouble and deliberately embarrassing themselves if they went to play games? However, the group of people didn't expect that Yun Yi's sister was not only good at shooting, but she was also so cool when she beat people up. When Yun Jian broke Brother Lei's wrist just now, no one saw clearly how she did it. After bidding farewell to Su Hao Cole and the rest, Yun Jian and Yun Yi were walking back to the villa. It was almost 7 or 8 o'clock at night. The night breeze blew past. As Yun Yi had given his jacket to Yun Jian, he was shivering in his short-sleeved shirt. "Brother, I just exercised. My whole body is warm now. You can wear this jacket yourself." Yun Jian took off his jacket and returned it to Yun Yi. She didn't allow Yun Yi to say anything else. Yun Yi opened his mouth, his handsome lips breaking into a smile as his thin lips brushed lightly. His sister was concerned about him. How could he reject his sister's good intentions? Hence, Yun Yi hurriedly put his jacket back on. When they returned to the villa, the lights were still on, the house was still on the house. Dong Ruan was an official, so he rarely returned home. Sometimes he would even stay out all night because he was busy. Her son, on the other hand, had been entrusted to a teacher in an aristocratic school, so she was rarely home. Qin Yiru, on the other hand, had gotten a job as a waitress in a restaurant. Her salary was much higher than when she was working in a textile factory. In comparison, a waitress job only required her to carry the dishes and clear the table. It was just that she got off work later, around 10:30 p.m. After all, Qin Yiru did not have a degree, so Dong Ruan could only arrange for her to work in a place like this. Now that Yun Jian and his family were staying at Dong Ruan's place, it added to the liveliness of the house. "Xiao Jin, I'm going back to my room to rest first. I'll be back in school tomorrow morning. It's our monthly exam in a few days. I can only calm down by revising in school," Yun Yi said to Yun Jian once he reached home and went upstairs to rest. He was serious in his studies and went upstairs to rest. Not long after Yun Yi left, a tall figure came down from upstairs. It was none other than Si. It was only then that Yun Jian remembered that she had yet to return the car she borrowed from him. Just as she was about to explain, Si's beautiful lips beat her to it. He asked first instead of asking about the car's whereabouts, "You just came back?" Si frowned slightly when he saw Yun Jian's bare arms. The short sleeves could not hide the coldness on her arms. Si took off his jacket and tossed it to Yun Jian, saying coldly, "It's cold at night and you're wearing so little. My auntie will blame me if you catch a cold." As he spoke, he tilted his chiseled face slightly. The last sentence was obviously made up by him. Chapter 102. Yun Jian was dumbfounded. She paused and caught the jacket Si tossed to her. She hesitated before putting it on slowly and said blankly, "I've left your car with my friend. I'll return it to you tomorrow." Si nodded and glanced at Yun Jian with his deep gaze before turning away. Without even a word of farewell, his tall and handsome figure disappeared from Yun Jian's sight. Yun Jian was stunned again. She pressed her dry lips together and grinned. The next morning Yun Jian had Snake Lizard drive Si's Lamborghini back and returned it to him along with the car keys. Yun Jian then went out with Snake Lizard. She had just settled down in Longmen City, but she had decided to start a business in Longmen City a long time ago. Yun Jian had always been a person who took responsibility for her actions. Since she had said it, she would do it without any hesitation. Zhang Jifan and the rest had been brought to Longmen City by Yun Jian before Yun Jian came. They were even staying in a rented house in Longmen City. Of course, all of this was secretly arranged by Yun Jian. Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were completely unaware of it. Country Z's economy had just taken off and the people's lives were gradually moving from poverty to prosperity. In the past, people used to travel on foot, but in this era, it was gradually being replaced by vehicles like bicycles and motorcycles. A vehicle like a car could only be bought by a few wealthy families. However, as the times changed, cars would be brought to the world stage sooner or later and replace them as the most convenient means of transportation. In other words, every household would be able to afford a car one day. Of course, all of this was inferred by Yun Jian based on the current situation and business trends. She had also fact-checked it. Places like Europe and America that were economically advanced and had a high standard of living were gradually developing in this direction. In spite of this, it was proven that Yun Jian's inference was accurate. Of course, this was a story for another time. Yun Jian planned to start a car marketing company. The idea might seem absurd. She was just an underage girl who was not even 18 years old, yet she wanted to start a car store? However, it was undeniable that starting a company required investment and Yun Jian had the money. She had channels to import cars from home and abroad as well. When Yun Jian told Zhang Jifan and the rest about her idea, Zhang Jifan and the rest felt their eyelids twitch and they almost fainted from shock. What? You want to start a car company? Zhang Jifan stuttered as he looked at Yun Jian in shock and fear. In this era, anyone who owned a motorbike at home could use it to look cool. A car was simply a symbol of the rich. What's more, to run such a car company, the number of cars needed was more than just a few. Secondly, they needed to have working capital. Secondly, they needed to go through the application process and they needed to have a sales store. These were all essential procedures. Yun Jian nodded and leaned her slender legs against the corner of the table. She smiled naturally at Zhang Jifan and said, "I've said that you don't need to worry about the company's investment. What you need to do is to manage this company for me." How could she not make money when there was a chance for her to make it? Only with investment could she make a profit. Yun Jian would never do a losing business. Me? Zhang Jifan pointed at himself and was stunned again. It's you. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and wiped her red lips. And this company will be registered under your name. After a pause, Yun Jian exuded a confident glow. Zhang Jifan and the rest could not help but look at her in a new light. The name of the new company will be. Yun Jian raised her eyes slightly and looked ahead with a smile. New start. A new life, a new start. Chapter 103. Zhang Jifan was stupefied. He did not expect Yun Jian to trust him so much. Yun Jian was fully responsible for the investment, so he did not have to worry about the company's startup. However, he would still have to put his name on the company when it was registered. Such a good thing was hard to come by even in 8 lifetimes. At the same time, Zhang Jifan was certain of one thing. Whether he could walk this path with Yun Jian or not, he would not be disloyal. Sister Jian, don't worry. I, Zhang Jifan, guarantee you that I'll do my best. Zhang Jifan promised Yun Jian heavily. Ever since they were taken in by Yun Jian that day, Zhang Jifan and his buddies had regarded Yun Jian as their boss and called her Sister Jian. If Zhang Jifan became the company's leader, his buddies would naturally be the company's pioneers as well. The buddies looked at Yun Jian passionately and promised in unison. Sister Jian, we promise that we won't be disloyal. We swear to follow you to the end. Yun Jian nodded with a smile and told Zhang Jifan subtly, send in the company's application form as soon as possible. Also, keep an eye out for the storefront and let me know when you find it. You don't have to worry about anything else. Zhang Jifan nodded. Coming out of the rented apartment where Zhang Jifan and his buddies stayed, Yun Jian and Snake Lizard walked on the road. You're still as greedy for money as before. You own a few major international corporations but you still don't let go of any chance to earn money, Snake Lizard walked beside Yun Jian and teased Yun Jian when she did not say anything just now. Yun Jian suddenly grinned and glanced at Snake Lizard from the corner of her eyes with a hint of teenage innocence. If one doesn't love money, the devil takes the hindmost. Who can say no to money? Snake Lizard was a rather aloof person. Hearing Yun Jian's words, she could not help smiling but keep quiet. On Monday, Yun Jian returned to school. Running a company couldn't be rushed, especially when it came to the application process. At this moment, Yun Jian was already sitting in class. She twirled the black pen in her hand in boredom and looked around leisurely. Once class ended, the 2 clowns, Chen Sini and Zhang Xiaofeng, came running to Yun Jian. Hey master, it's been so many days. You should teach your disciple some powerful skills, right? Just like that move of yours last time. You didn't even need to look at the ground to know that I was going to hook you with my leg, and you even had the time to kick me back. That move is really cool. Zhang Xiaofeng's handsome face moved closer, and he said to Yun Jian with admiration and admiration. Chen Sini pushed Zhang Xiaofeng away and said to Yun Jian with a smile, "Don't mind him, don't mind him. Jian Jian, let's talk among ourselves." Since Yun Jian transferred to Class A of E High School, there had been plenty of people who tried to pick on her, but they were all blocked by Zhang Xiaofeng and Chen Sini, so she had been living an easy life. Even if she did not look for trouble herself, sometimes trouble would come knocking on her door. Yun Jian noticed a heated gaze in the classroom that had been staring at her for a long time, but she pretended not to see it. It was just that the owner of the gaze could not hold it in anymore as he walked over to Yun Jian. Lu Rongrong came over to look at Yun Jian and asked in annoyance, "Hey, who was the person who came to pick you up last Friday?" It was not Lu Rongrong's fault for asking. Siyi's looks were too alluring. His handsome face was bound to mesmerize many girls. Yun Jian looked up at Lu Rongrong before lowering her gaze to meet Chen Sini's eyes, ignoring her. Chapter 104. F***ck Lu Rongrong, what do you mean by this? Zhang Xiaofeng was the first to stand up for Yun Jian when he saw Lu Rongrong throwing her weight around in front of his master. That's right. What's wrong with my Jian Jian being picked up after school? What does it have to do with you? Why should I tell you? Who do you think you are? Chen Sini scolded Lu Rongrong before Zhang Xiaofeng could. Lu Rongrong had always been a spoiled brat. She was flashy but not practical. She pointed at Chen Sini angrily and opened her mouth. However, she stomped her feet and could not say anything. In the end, she snorted and ran away. Yun Jian could not help grinning at the sight. The morning sun shone in through the window and refracted on Yun Jian's rosy cheeks, making her feel warmer and more comfortable. It had been a long time since she felt so comfortable. Every time someone tried to pick a fight in school, Chen Sini and Zhang Xiaofeng would chase them away with their sharp tongues like this. They were adorable. Lu Rongrong really thinks she's some spoiled brat. What's she being so cocky for? How shameless. Chen Sini was the first to flare up when Yun Jian was infuriated. She huffed and sat down opposite Yun Jian. Zhang Xiaofeng chuckled dryly as well before he looked around as if he remembered something. He turned to whisper mysteriously to Yun Jian and Chen Sini, "Do you know? The black market is holding an underground tournament this Saturday. It's at Longtu Mountain not far from our school. How about it? Do you want to go and watch? Haha, I can guarantee that the lineup will be spectacular." To convince Yun Jian to go, Zhang Xiaofeng emphasized, "And I heard that it's a bet between the mafia boss of Longmen City and a foreigner." As a boy, Zhang Xiaofeng was especially interested in this kind of fighting competition. That was why after Yun Jian showed off her skills, he shamelessly asked to be her disciple. Yun Jian raised her eyebrows when she heard the words mafia boss. The mafia boss was Su Haokol's father, Su Zetian. Strictly speaking, Su Zetian was a member of the Kosha mercenaries. Su Zetian wants to bet with the foreigners in a challenge tournament? Upon hearing this news, Yun Jian recalled the first time she met Snake Lizard and Su Zetian since her rebirth. Su Zetian had a favor to ask of Snake Lizard. Could this be what he was referring to? She pursed her dry lips to moisten them and said, "I'll go." Zhang Xiaofeng snickered, thinking that his words had worked, and laughed even more cheerfully. Yun Jian's lips curled into a faint smile, which made people feel as if they understood her. She was devilishly charming. Just like that, a week passed by peacefully. When she returned home from school on Friday, Yun Jian received the news that Zhang Zhifan had approved the company's application. He had also asked for some connections and found a suitable store. The location of the store was great. It was big enough for cars to be displayed and the location was well connected. When the car store was opened in the future, it would not be inconspicuous due to its remote location. Since it was a new piece of land and there were many merchants who wanted to buy the store, the organizer decided to use the auction format. Bidding and the highest bidder would win. The auction would be held tonight. When Yun Jian heard the news, she only told Zhang Zhifan, "Get ready tonight and go to the auction with me." Chapter 105. This auction was organized by the organizers, so more than 1 or 2 shops and plots of land were up for sale. In spite of it, Yun Jian only needed the store. Because the auction was a big event, Zhang Zhifan deliberately dressed himself up before going. He changed his appearance from that of a hoodlum to a suit, which made him look like a big boss. Before this he was just a hoodlum with a loan shark. As usual, Yun Jian tied her hair into a high ponytail. She had a good foundation, so even if she didn't put on makeup, her facial features were still exquisite and delicate. Her eyelashes were long and narrow, and when she blinked, she gave people a feeling that she had a spiritual aura. She looked pure and innocent, but the slight curve of her lips made people unable to help but notice her. Before leaving, she knocked on Si Yi's door next to hers. Knock, knock, knock. After 3 knocks, the door opened. When the door opened, Yun Jian smelled an elegant fragrance. It was faint, but it made her feel good. Si Yi appeared at the door. He was dressed in casual clothes and his wet hair stuck to his handsome face. There was an unfathomable smile on his exquisite face. It was obvious that he had just taken a shower. What is it? Si Yi's lips curled into a beautiful curve. What is it? His magnetic voice was a little hoarse, but it was full of charm. Yun Jian looked at him with a smile and licked her lips. Lend me your car again. Si Yi's starry eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. He turned his body slightly, and his tall body surrounded Yun Jian's thin and weak body. She could feel his breath coming from above. My car isn't that easy to borrow. How are you going to compensate me? As he spoke, he looked at Yun Jian from head to toe with ill intentions. It had to be said that although Yun Jian's body was thin and weak, she was still lean in the right places. She had developed very well and there were signs of her curvy body. He believed that in less than 2 years she would definitely be a great beauty who could charm a large group of people to death with just a glance. When Yun Jian heard this, she smiled and glanced at Si Yi from the corner of her eyes. How do you want me to make it up to you? As she spoke, she flipped her hair and took a step closer to Si Yi. However, before she could even get close to Si Yi, Yun Jian's delicate fists turned into eagle claws. She launched a sneak attack at Si Yi's waist. Her speed was so fast that normal people would not have expected it. Seduction was one of the essential skills of a secret agent. In her previous life, although Yun Jian had never been in love with a man, and had never even been intimate with a man, she would still make use of her lust to lower the enemy's guard and kill them in one move. She obviously did not intend to kill Si Yi. She only wanted to take the car keys from Si Yi's waist. However, Yun Jian did not expect that Si Yi would be able to dodge her attack with a sidestep. His speed was actually faster than hers. Although Yun Jian had been training her body since her rebirth, her physical strength could not be compared to her previous life. Even so, when Si Yi dodged her attack, Yun Jian was stunned. When Si Yi dodged to the side, Yun Jian could tell that even if she had faced him in her previous life, she would not have been able to escape unscathed. Yun Jian suddenly curled her lips. She twisted her hand and threw herself into Si Yi's firm chest. The fresh fragrance of a young girl drifted into his nose. Si Yi, who had never been so intimate with a woman, was stunned. Yun Jian took advantage of this moment to reach out and take the car keys from Si Yi's waist. She then left Si Yi's chest in a flash and ran far away. She could not help but turn back to leave a smile. I'll take the car keys, thanks. As she spoke, Yun Jian had already run down the stairs. Chapter 106. On the other hand, Yun Jian had driven the Lamborghini to the entrance of Zhang Jifan's rental apartment and was waiting for him. When Zhang Jifan saw the Lamborghini, his eyes trembled violently. Obviously he was shocked. There were only a few types of cars that he had seen on a daily basis. It was especially so in a developing city like Longmen City where sports cars were only affordable for the wealthy. In normal business, those who had some money would usually drive cars of brands like Santana, Honda, and Mazda. They were all cars that consumed low fuel, were affordable, and had average appearances. This era had yet to reach the era where cars were everywhere. Naturally, it was the best starting point to start a car marketing business. Therefore, when Zhang Jifan saw the modified super sports car, the Lamborghini, there was an irrepressible glint in his eyes. More than that, it was shock. Sister Jin, where did you get this car? After Zhang Jifan got into the car, he was still stiff, not daring to touch anything in the car, afraid that he would break something. In the end, he could not help asking Yun Jian. I borrowed it. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and did not explain further. She then started the engine and sped away under Zhang Jifan's horrified gaze. Soon they arrived at the entrance of the auction. The auction was coordinated and organized by various major sponsors. It was a grand occasion and not just anyone could enter. If one did not dress appropriately, they would not even be able to enter the auction. Yun Jian did not have an invitation, so she drove the Lamborghini to show her status. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to enter the auction venue. How would he be able to buy that piece of land and open a car dealership? Of course, Yun Jian would not allow the possibility of being stopped at the entrance. The auction was held in the best location in Longmen City, the Fashion Building. At the moment, at the entrance of the Fashion Building, Yun Jian drove the black Lamborghini and drifted past the entrance before she slammed on the brakes and parked in front of the building. She got out of the car and walked into the building with Zhang Jifan. The surrounding people were dumbfounded. The appearance of the Lamborghini caused an uproar among the crowd. In this era, it was already very good to be able to drive a car. Although those who came to attend the auction today were wealthy and respectable bosses who stood at the pinnacle of Longmen City, it was rare to find someone who could afford a sports car. This Bolangini was a modified supercar, and it was an international limited edition. There were only a few of them in the world. Many of the people present knew about this car, but they had never had the chance to see it in real life. Now that they saw it, they couldn't help but be stunned. Which big shot had come to Longmen City? However, when Yun Jian got out of the driver's seat of the Bolangini, everyone gasped. Heavens! Could it be that this super sports car belonged to a young girl who hadn't even reached 18 yet? At this time, Yun Jian had been respectfully invited in by the receptionist at the entrance of the Fashion Building. The auction had yet to begin, but the people standing around were all important figures in the business world or the government. All of them were using such an occasion to find people who could get along well with them. Officials protecting each other and businessmen benefiting each other had already become a social trend. Yun Jian was particularly eye-catching standing here because the people standing here were either mature women or mature men who were all around middle-aged. She was the only one who was young. There was only one reason why the people around her were looking at her. One must have some status to enter the auction or know someone important to be brought in. The fact that this young girl could enter meant that she was somewhat capable. Yun Jian. Under everyone's gaze, an untimely low male voice suddenly rang. Turning, Yun Jian saw a face that was both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. Zhang Taijun? Her uncle in name? She had met him once when Su Haokol was assassinated by a sniper the other day. Chapter 107. The moment Zhang Taijun saw Yun Jian, he was really stunned. He didn't have a deep impression of Yun Jian. In the past, Yun Jian was always soft and weak. Even if she was bullied, she wouldn't protest. But that day when he met Yun Jian at the hotel, she was the first to react. She pushed a few people away and dodged the sniper's bullet. At that time, Zhang Taijun was extremely shocked and frightened. Of course, at that time he was afraid of the sniper and ran away, so he didn't have time to care about Yun Jian. Today he was able to enter the auction venue because Zhang Taijun pulled a lot of strings to squeeze into the venue. What he did not expect, however, was that Yun Jian was here as well. She actually had a way to sneak in here? Not just anyone could enter the auction hall. With Yun Jian's identity and status, she didn't have the ability to enter this place at all. Yun Jian glanced at Zhang Taijun from the corner of her eyes and didn't say anything. In her impression, this nominal uncle of hers didn't care about her family. Moreover, when relatives gathered for dinner, he would show off in front of her family. After all, among the group of relatives, Zhang Taijun was more successful. He started his own business from scratch and finally became a small boss. Among the group of relatives and friends, he felt that he was different and had a sense of superiority. When Qin Yiru borrowed money from his family, Zhang Taijun was very embarrassed and fanned the flames. He was very narrow-minded. Yun Jian, why are you here? Although Zhang Taijun and Yun Jian were relatives, they weren't close. He even called her by her full name. Zhang Taijun obviously didn't believe that Yun Jian had the ability to enter such a high-end venue. He directly assumed that Yun Jian had sneaked in from some small corner of the Fashion Building. His tone wasn't very polite. And without waiting for Yun Jian to reply, Zhang Taijun frowned and continued to shout at Yun Jian in the tone of an elder, "There's going to be an auction here. The auction is about to start. How did you sneak in here? You should be more sensible. You have to know your limits even though you're already so old. This is not a place where you can come and go as you please. If there's nothing else, then hurry up and leave." He scolded Yun Jian for a while, but Zhang Taijun wanted her to leave as soon as possible. This was not a place for a child like her. Zhang Jifan, who was standing behind Yun Jian, pursed his lips and rolled his eyes at Zhang Taijun in disdain. Yun Jian raised her brow and didn't argue with Zhang Taijun. Since Zhang Taijun would also appear at the auction, some things could no longer be hidden. She would never give up the store that she had set her eyes on because of some irrelevant people or things. This was not her style. Yun Jian's pure pink cheeks became moist as she revealed a charming and beautiful smile. She said to Zhang Taijun, "I'm here to participate in the auction." "Nonsense." Zhang Tiejuan's face sank. His face turned gloomy. "This is not a place where a child like you should come to. Hurry up and leave before the auction starts." Just as Zhang Taijun said this, the middle-aged man standing next to Zhang Taijun tugged at Zhang Tiejuan's coat and pointed at the door. A group of people looked towards the door. They saw a group of middle-aged men in suits walking in from outside the door. Each of them had an extraordinary aura. Standing at the front was Mayor Gu, whom Yun Jian had met at Su Haoko's birthday party. At this moment, Mayor Gu was surrounded by a large group of people who were fawning over him. The moment Zhang Taijun saw Mayor Gu, he couldn't care less about Yun Jian. He suppressed his emotions and walked towards Mayor Gu with the middle-aged man who had tugged at his coat just now. This was the reason why Zhang Taijun had tried so hard to sneak into the auction. He had been waiting for Mayor Gu. Naturally, he had something to ask of Mayor Gu. Mayor Gu, who was surrounded by a group of people, turned his head and accidentally saw Yun Jian, who was particularly eye-catching. Mayor Gu pushed through the crowd and walked over. Seeing that Mayor Gu had actually seen him, Zhang Taijun stood still and didn't dare to lift his feet. He held his breath. Mayor Gu had actually noticed him? Zhang Taijun suddenly looked like he was flattered. When Mayor Gu brushed past him to greet Yun Jian, however, Zhang Taijun felt like he had been struck by a bolt of lightning on a sunny day. Chapter 108. Mayor Gu was the mayor of Longmen City and held the highest position in the city. Under normal circumstances, only others would try to curry favor with him. Mayor Gu himself didn't like the bribery between bureaucrats, so he didn't pay much attention to others. What did they see today? Mayor Gu personally greeting and befriending a teenage girl? Who was this girl? How could Mayor Gu value her so much? Zhang Taijun watched the scene unfolding before him with a face that looked like he had eaten dog poop. Yun Jian knew Mayor Gu? More importantly, Mayor Gu seemed to be friendly to Yun Jian? He was shocked and regretful. Recalling what he had said just now, he felt like he was showing off in front of an expert. Yun Jian was not reserved like others when she faced Mayor Gu. She smiled easily and looked natural as she pressed her lips together and said, "Yes, what a coincidence." "It is. Girl, are you here for the auction too? Do you want to go into the hall with me now?" Mayor Gu invited with a squint. Mayor Gu might look aloof from worldly affairs, but he had been in the government for so many years and had successfully held the mayor's position for so many years. Other things aside, he had the ability to judge people. Despite her young age, Mayor Gu had to pay attention to her based on this fact alone. Even the mafia boss had to bow down to Yun Jian. In short, even Snake Lizard had to listen to Yun Jian. Was Yun Jian really just an ordinary girl? Mayor Gu rationally chose to stand with Yun Jian. His instinct told him that this girl was not ordinary. When the crowd heard Mayor Gu's invitation to Yun Jian, there was another uproar. Yun Jian would not reject having Mayor Gu leading the team. It would save her a lot of trouble. She nodded and said, "All right." Yun Jian then gestured to Zhang Jifan, indicating for him to enter the hall behind her. Zhang Jifan was dumbfounded. He had never thought that an insignificant person like him would be invited by Mayor Gu one day. This was all thanks to Yun Jian. Just as Yun Jian and Mayor Gu were about to enter the auction hall, Zhang Tiejuan's shameless voice rang out, "Wait!" Zhang Taijun ran over and stopped in front of Mayor Gu. Although he didn't understand why Mayor Gu knew Yun Jian and valued her so much, now was not the time to talk about it. Mayor Gu, hello. I'm Xiao Jian's uncle, you can call me Xiao Zhang." As Zhang Taijun spoke, he pointed out his relationship with Yun Jian. Then he continued, "It's like this. My friend and I want to apply for approval for our recent cooperation." Zhang Taijun wanted to make use of Yun Jian's relationship to talk to Mayor Gu, so that he could finish his vicious task. But before he could finish speaking, Yun Jian beat him to it. Yun Jian watched as Mayor Gu introduced Zhang Taijun word by word. She smiled and said, "He is indeed my mother's sister's husband." There was an inexplicable estrangement in his words. That one sentence sealed Zhang Tiejuan's fate. Mayor Gu understood what Yun Jian meant. If they were relatives, how could they be close if they did not even address each other as uncle? Mayor Gu waved his hand. Since Zhang Taijun was not someone Yun Jian cared about, what right did he have to give him face? "Hey, let's talk next time. I have something urgent to discuss with the girl." Mayor Gu waved at Zhang Taijun. Then he followed Yun Jian into the auction hall. Only Zhang Taijun, who was exasperated, was left with a sour expression. There was only one word left in his mind: "It's over." Chapter 109. Even so, Zhang Taijun still shamelessly followed the crowd into the auction hall. A person like Zhang Taijun naturally wouldn't be here to buy properties or shops. He was just here to join in the fun, and his target today was only Mayor Gu. However, what happened next was completely unexpected. Yun Jian was already sitting in the VIP seats in the auction hall with Mayor Gu. She was only qualified to sit in the VIP seats because she was accompanied by Mayor Gu. Zhang Jifan was flattered. He sat in the VIP seats and forcefully suppressed his nervous emotions that were about to burst out. He pretended to be calm, but in fact he was so excited that he couldn't express it with words. When the guests were all seated, the auction officially began. The host of the auction this time was an enchanting woman. This woman swayed her butt, showing off her pair of white and slender legs that were exposed. She stood in the middle of the host. Honorable guests, greetings to you all. I'm the host of this auction. You can call me Big Sister Lee. Long story short, let's get to the main topic. This auction will still follow the old rules. All the auction locations will be quoted after the auction starts, and the old rule of the highest bidder wins. Big Sister Lee swayed her butt as she walked. She used a pleasant voice to say beautiful words, but it was enough to make some of the men present addicted to the sight. Fortunately, Big Sister Lee wasn't here to show off. After a few words, the auction officially began. At the beginning of the auction, the shops that were sold at a cheaper price and were not in a good location. Yun Jian naturally wasn't interested. Mayor Gu, on the other hand, was sizing her up all the time. He even asked a few irrelevant questions from time to time. Little girl, where did you go to school? Yun Jian continued to smile and replied him, Dragon Gate No. 1 High School. Mayor Gu made a strange sound and laughed. He said to Yun Jian, then we're really fated. My grandson is also studying at Longmen No. 1 Middle School. I don't know if you've heard of that brat's name. At this point, Mayor Gu did not care whether Yun Jian was interested in this matter or not. He directly introduced his grandson to Yun Jian. There was a hint of pride in his tone, but also a hint of helplessness. That brat is called Gu Heng. If you meet him in No. 1 Middle School, don't go easy on him in the future. Teach him a good lesson for me. From Mayor Gu's tone, it was obvious that he wanted to build a good relationship with Yun Jian. Zhang Jifan, who sat beside Yun Jian, was stupefied once more when he heard that a prominent figure like Mayor Gu was trying to curry favor with them. Yun Jian, she had such great ability. Yun Jian merely curled her lips into a faint smile and did not directly reply to Mayor Gu's words. She was stunned. Mayor Gu had mentioned his grandson and even asked her to teach him a lesson the next time she met him, not to be soft-hearted. It was really strange to have a grandfather like Mayor Gu. Suddenly Yun Jian cast a sidelong glance at the auction stage. She pursed her lips slightly and spat out a line of words from her red lips. It's finally here. The area that she was preparing to bid on was finally being auctioned off. Mayor Gu was stunned. What? However, the latter half of Yun Jian's sentence shocked Mayor Gu for a long time. Yun Jian leaned back in her seat lazily and looked at Sister Lee, who was speaking eloquently on the auction stage. Her eyes did not look at Mayor Gu. I want this shop. Mayor Gu followed Yun Jian's gaze and listened to Sister Lee's explanation. It was a very good area and the price was very high. Ordinary people could not afford this piece of land. However, from Yun Jian's tone, she wanted to bid for this area. Chapter 110. Storefront transfer meant that the owner would sell the store to the other party. In other words, as long as the storefront was bought, it would be a personal property in the future and there would be no need to pay rent. That was why the storefront Yun Jian had her eyes on. Store No. 1 of Dongchun Port had a starting bid of 2 million. 2 million was not a small sum in this day and age. Ordinary people who had assets of more than 1 million were already considered to be in the upper echelons of society. Hence, once the starting bid was announced, many who were interested in the storefront flinched. In spite of it, there were still quite a number of rich people who came today, so someone quickly made a bid. 2.01 million. A middle-aged man raised the price. Zhang Taijun, who was sitting at the back corner of the auction house, shuddered when he heard the number. He was running a small business and could be considered one of the wealthiest families in Xinjiang town. However, when he came to a place like Longmen City that was filled with hidden talents, what he could do was insignificant. Hence, he was instantly in awe of these rich people. The only thing he could not figure out was how Yun Jian was able to gain Mayor Gu's favor. Why was Mayor Gu so friendly to her? 2.02 million. Someone followed up immediately after the middle-aged man made his bid. Following that, the people who made their bids rose and fell, but there was not much of a fluctuation. It was usually a 10 to 20,000 increment. Mayor Gu's astute eyes were fixed on Yun Jian all along. Mayor Gu was someone who could not keep his thoughts to himself, so he asked Yun Jian directly, "Girl, why aren't you bidding since you want to buy this storefront?" Zhang Jifan, who sat beside Yun Jian, had the same question but he dared not ask. Yun Jian's reply was a simple word, "Wait." Mayor Gu was full of doubts again, but in the end he swallowed them down. Store number 1 of Dongchun Port was a storefront that many big bosses were fighting for, so the bidding price was gradually rising. It had even reached close to 3 million. In the end, some bosses who thought it was not worth it gave up, leaving 2 of them to fight for it. 1 million. "Mo Shilong, you old thing, don't fight with me." One of them had obviously reached his limit. He couldn't help but yell at the other person who had been forcing him to raise the price. 2 million. The big boss named Mo Shilong still insisted and refused to compromise. The 2 of them were competing with each other to increase the price, and neither of them was willing to give in. Zhang Taijun, who was sitting in the corner, gasped. He muttered in his heart. Today he had finally witnessed the competition between the big bosses. That was not something that could be measured in thousands or tens of thousands. A few million for a store. He had never seen such a scene before. After the auction was over, he would be considered a person who had gained a lot of knowledge. Perhaps he could even brag about it to his friends and relatives. 4 million. The hot-tempered big boss had begun to blow his beard and glare. Gritting his teeth, he fiercely quoted a price. This was his bottom line. 4.01 million. The big boss called Mo Shilong was still competing, but his expression was not any better. Spending 4 million just to buy a store was naturally not worth it, so the hot-tempered big boss had to give up. "I'll give it to you, give it to you. Mo Shilong, don't let me get the chance to deal with you next time." The hot-tempered big boss yelled at Mo Shilong. This old man will wait." Mo Shilong snorted coldly. Finally, a calm expression appeared on his face. Although the price had been raised quite a bit, he finally got it. After all, other than the hot-tempered big boss, no one else present could compete with him. Just as elder sister Li smiled and was about to count down the last 3 seconds. Chapter 111. 14.01 million. As soon as Yun Jian said that, everyone was shocked. They all looked at the little girl sitting next to Mayor Gu in disbelief. They thought that the little girl was only qualified to enter the auction because she knew Mayor Gu. Who would have thought that she would bid and increase the price by 10 million? The crowd was in an uproar and focused all their attention on Yun Jian. At that moment, Zhang Taijun, who was sitting respectfully in the corner, suddenly tensed up. He glared at Yun Jian with wide eyes, his expression complicated. In a large-scale auction like this, if one could not pay the price after bidding, they would have to bear legal responsibility. Therefore, since Yun Jian had the courage to bid, it meant that she could definitely afford it. Got more than 10 million. Zhang Taijun was trembling all over at that moment. All of his family's passbooks added up to less than 200,000. His family's wealth was enough to make people envious in Xinjiang town, but he did not expect that someone would spend more than 10 million to buy a storefront at an auction. The most important thing was that this person who made everyone dumbfounded was his niece in name. Moreover, she was the poorest among all his relatives and friends in the family. Cough, cough, cough. Sister Li could not react for a long time. Fortunately, she was an old hand at auctions and knew how to ease the atmosphere. 14.01 million. Is there anyone who wants to bid higher? Sister Li first tried to ease the atmosphere. Of course, many of the people present did not even have 14.01 million. Under such circumstances, who would continue to bid higher? Sister Li immediately started the countdown. 14.01 million going once, 14.01 million going twice, 14.01 million going thrice. Sold. Dongchun Harbor Store number 1 was now completely under Yun Jian's name. Yun Jian showed a smile that did not match her age. It was as comfortable as a spring breeze. Dongchun Harbor Store number 1 was originally auctioned for more than 10 million. It was definitely not a good deal. However, the person who bought this storefront was Yun Jian, so the situation was completely different. One had to know that she, Yun Jian, would never do a business where she would have to pay for herself if there was no profit to be made. Of course, she didn't want to compete with that group of people, so she directly raised the price by 1 degree and bought the store that was going to be auctioned. Because of this price, the others would definitely not raise the price anymore. Yun Jian paid all the fees in one go and signed a transfer contract with the owner of the previous store. The store was officially included in her name. By the time he was done, it was already late. After leaving the auction house, Mayor Gu tried to get close to Yun Jian. His intuition told him that this girl was destined to do great things. When Yun Jian left, Mayor Gu shouted after her, "Little girl. If you need anything in the future, feel free to look for me. If you can't find me, you can look for my grandson, Gu Heng. Let that brat pass the message." At this time, Yun Jian had already walked quite a distance, but she still faintly smiled. Obviously, she heard Mayor Gu's voice. She walked over and got into the Lamborghini sports car. After Zhang Jifan sat down, she stepped on the accelerator and the car sped out like a flash of lightning. Zhang Taijun had already rushed out as fast as he could, but he still could not catch up with Yun Jian's pace in time. His whole body was trembling and trembling. He did not catch up. He was screwed. This was Zhang Tiejuan's first thought. At this moment, if Yun Jian was standing in front of him, as long as she forgave him, even if he had to kneel down, it would be worth it. For the first time, Zhang Taijun felt that he had failed. He finally understood why Yun Jian was admired by Mayor Gu. Because she had the capital. She had the ability. Chapter 112. Returning the car keys to CE, Yun Jian went back to her room and logged into the web with her laptop to contact Alluring Demon. Alluring Demon was also her subordinate. Unlike Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard, Alluring Demon was in charge of legitimate forces and was involved in all aspects of business. Now that the storefront was settled, the next step was to decorate it. Yun Jian had handed the task to Zhang Jifan. Of course, it would take some time, at least a few months. Yun Jian wanted to obtain the channel to import cars into Country Z's Longmen City through Alluring Demon. Alluring Demon was indeed easy to handle. She had agreed to it just as Yun Jian mentioned it to her and had asked Yun Jian to leave the address. After contacting the dealer of imported cars, they would send the cars over after the storefront was renovated. There would be no shortage of imported cars and domestic cars. Once the matter was settled, Yun Jian fell asleep. It was a dreamless night. Early the next morning, Yun Jian received a message from Snake, Lizard when she came back from her workout. The phone she was holding was newly bought by Snake, Lizard to facilitate their communication. In her past life, Yun Jian had a phone too, but she changed her number frequently to prevent anyone from tracking her through the system. Now that Yun Jian was reborn and her residence was stable, there were no enemies from her past life who came looking for her. Naturally, she did not have to worry about her whereabouts being exposed due to her phone number. Snake. Lizard's message was simple. It was to ask Yun Jian out to meet her at a coffee shop. Yun Jian went to the meeting as scheduled. Snake. Lizard was already waiting for her on a chair beside a table in the coffee shop. When she saw Yun Jian coming over, she could not help waving her hand. What's wrong? Yun Jian sat opposite Snake. Lizard, her fingers brushing the table lightly as she asked. Snake. Lizard lowered her voice and told her, Sister Jian, I have some personal matters to attend to. I have to leave for a while. Ever since Snake. Lizard came to Longmen City, she had been calling Yun Jian Sister Jian, like Zhang Jifan and others. Yun Jian didn't think it was inappropriate. Okay. Yun Jian nodded in acquiescence. Although Snake. Lizard was her subordinate, it was her freedom to leave for a while. This was something that Yun Jian would never force. Also, there is one thing I need your help with. Snake. Lizard took a sip of the coffee in her teacup and said to Yun Jian. Oh? Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. In fact, she had already guessed something when Snake. Lizard spoke. The mafia boss of Longmen City, Su Zetian, is a member of the Kosha mercenaries. He's holding an underground tournament at Longtu Mountain a week later and has made a bet with the foreigners. Initially, Su Zetian had requested support from the organization to help him win the tournament. I came to Longmen City using this as an excuse. Now that I'm leaving, I hope Sister Jian can help with the tournament. Snake. Lizard looked at Yun Jian and enunciated each word clearly. Her identity was not exposed to Su Zetian and his gang, or he would be scared half to death. A veteran of the Kosha mercenaries had come to Longmen City to help him in the tournament. To the public, Snake. Lizard had used this as an excuse to come to Longmen City to look for Yun Jian. Of course, Snake. Lizard had left and could not find anyone to help Su Zetian win the tournament, so the first person that came to her mind was Yun Jian. Su Zetian did not have much status in the Kosha mercenaries, but he was still a member. Okay, Yun Jian agreed with a smile. She agreed to help. If Su Zetian was just a member of the Kosha mercenaries, Yun Jian might not have agreed to help. After all, she was a global leader in her previous life, the big boss of the kosher mercenaries. She was not at all interested in the petty squabbles of such insignificant people. However, Su Zetian was the father of her brother's best friend. Chapter 113. Snake. Lizard left as soon as she was done talking to Yun Jian. Yun Jian returned to her school life as well. During the self-study session on Monday night, the homeroom teacher returned to the class after the school meeting and announced something that all the teachers and students were looking forward to: the autumn outing. Yizhang was the best junior high school in the city. It was also an aristocratic school that balanced work and rest. First of all, most of the students in the school were from rich families. The majority of them were rich and powerful. Coming to Yizhang for these rich students, it was not enough to have a boring academic life. Therefore, the school had set up many activities. The spring outing was an event that most schools would organize once a year, while the autumn outing was only held in Yizhang among all the junior high schools in Longmen City. It was the end of October. When Teacher Yu announced to the class that the school was going to hold an autumn outing, all the students in the class cheered excitedly. Wow! The autumn outing is finally here. Chen Sini turned to shake Yun Jian's hand happily, almost stretching herself into a straight line in her excitement. Yun Jian only had a slight smile on her face, making it impossible to tell if she was happy or worried. In spite of it, Chen Sini, who was too excited to notice Yun Jian's current state. She was bouncing up and down in excitement. All the students in the class were in a state of excitement. It was only when Miss Yu clapped her hands to signal for the class to quieten down that they quieted down. The autumn outing was here. It was good news, but what everyone was looking forward to was, where would they go for the autumn outing this year? Therefore, when Miss Yu clapped her hands again to signal for silence, everyone looked at her with bated breath. Cough, I know how everyone is feeling now, but don't get too excited, Miss Yu said jokingly before regaining her composure. The autumn outing is next Monday morning, so when you return to school this weekend, you can bring the snacks that you want to eat over. The location of the autumn outing is a scenic forest park in the suburbs. The bus fare and entrance fee are 30 yuan in total. Don't forget to bring the money over when you return to school this weekend. There's also an open space in the forest park where you can organize a barbecue activity. Those who can afford it can bring their barbecue tools and ingredients over. The autumn outing this time should be attended by all the teachers and students of the school. If your family can't make it, you can also apply not to go. Teacher Yu explained everything in one breath. Of course, after the students heard these words, their hearts began to stir. Most of the students who studied here came from rich families, so there were very few students who didn't participate in the spring and autumn excursions, which required them to pay for themselves. Alright, stop quarreling. The evening self-study session should continue as per normal. I'll say this up front. If anyone continues to quarrel in the self-study session, then don't even think about going to the autumn outing next week. Teacher Yu instructed the students to calm down. But at this moment, how could the students still calm down? Other than those whose families could not afford to go, the other students were all in high spirits. However, with Teacher Yu's harsh words in front of them, the students didn't dare to make any noise. Whoosh! Chen Sini, who was sitting in front of Yun Jian, suddenly threw a ball of paper to Yun Jian. If there was someone behind them, they would definitely see that Yun Jian's eyes were fixed on the textbook on the table. She stretched out her hand to catch the ball of paper without even looking at it. Chapter 114. Yun Jian was automatically categorized as one of the students who had good grades but came from a poor family. Chen Sini didn't mean any harm. Instead, she just wanted to help Yun Jian. She thought that Yun Jian's family was really poor. However, Chen Sini wasn't good at expressing herself, so her words were more straightforward. Yun Jian pursed her lips and wrote 3 words on the paper that Chen Sini threw at her. I will go. When she was done, she crumpled the paper into a ball and was about to throw it to Chen Sini when she heard Lu Rongrong, who was sitting not far away, complaining to Teacher Yu openly. Sir, I saw Chen Sini sneakily tossing a note to Yun Jian just now. It's class time now. Even if everyone's excited about the autumn outing, we can't forget the class rules. We're not allowed to toss notes in class. It was apparent that Lu Rongrong happened to see Chen Sini tossing the paper ball at Yun Jian just now. Lu Rongrong was shocked. Yun Jian was just looking at her textbook, but she reached out and held the note in her hand. However, she didn't think too much about it. She snorted in her heart. What was so surprising about that? It was just a coincidence. Zhang Xiaofeng kept chasing after Yun Jian, calling her master, and asking her to teach him martial arts. However, in Lu Rongrong's eyes, it was just Yun Jian's little trick to pretend to be cool. Tsk, who was she trying to show off to? Although Teacher Yu was a newly appointed teacher who had just graduated from university, what she hated the most was the sneaky actions of her students during class. Therefore, when Lu Rongrong said that, Teacher Yu immediately walked over to Yun Jian. It's class time now and you're passing notes? Do you still want to go to the autumn outing next week? Teacher Yu stood beside Yun Jian and Qin Sini and said aggressively. Teacher Yu was a very disciplined person. She would never look down on a student or take special care of a student because of their family background. It was precisely because Teacher Yu was very disciplined that as long as a student made a mistake, Teacher Yu would definitely punish them severely when he found out. Teacher Yu had always been very strict when it came to such matters. Teacher, I saw Qin Sini throw the note to Yun Jian with my own eyes. It must still be on the table now. Lu Rongrong added arrogantly. She had been unhappy with Yun Jian for a long time. However, Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini were always protecting Yun Jian, so she didn't have a chance to do anything. Today her chance came today. How dare Qin Sini and Yun Jian pass notes right under the homeroom teacher's nose? Wasn't this the same as seeking death? Therefore Lu Rongrong immediately complained to Teacher Yu. Qin Sini was caught red-handed by Teacher Yu. She hated Lu Rongrong so much that she gritted her teeth, but she was also afraid of being scolded by the teacher. After all, she was usually a good student who didn't get scolded by teachers. Therefore, she lowered her head and didn't even dare to look at Teacher Yu. Seeing this, Lu Rongrong became even more arrogant. She looked at Yun Jian provocatively. However, Yun Jian reached out and scratched her head. Then she looked at Teacher Yu and shrugged. She didn't feel humble at all. We didn't pass any note. Then she looked at Lu Rongrong and blinked. Student, could it be that you're old and dim-sighted? She actually said that she was presbyopic. Lu Rongrong almost exploded in anger. She ran down from her seat and went to Yun Jian's desk. She started to flip through Yun Jian's textbooks in front of Teacher Yu. Teacher, it's here. I saw it just now. Yun Jian hid the note in the textbooks on her desk. Lu Rongrong said as she flipped through the pile of textbooks on Yun Jian's desk. In the end, even the last book was flipped from cover to cover, but there wasn't a trace of the note in front of everyone's eyes. Lu Rongrong was dumbfounded. When the whole class looked at Lu Rongrong again, their expressions immediately changed. Chapter 115. Where's the note? Lu Rongrong, where did they send the note? Don't tell me you ate it? Yeah. Lu Rongrong's eyesight must be going bad. A bunch of students in the class couldn't hold it in anymore and started yelling noisily. Perhaps it was because they had heard the news about the autumn outing, but they hadn't calmed down yet. Now that Lu Rongrong was in trouble, the whole class took the opportunity to make a ruckus. Lu Rongrong's gloomy face instantly turned cold. A haze covered her entire body. She trembled and felt very wronged. She clearly saw Qin Sini pass the note to Yun Jian. How could it be gone just like that? Lu Rongrong, you're framing your classmate for passing notes. What else do you have to say? Teacher Yu frowned with a trace of displeasure on her face. As mentioned earlier, Teacher Yu was a very disciplined person. She especially hated students who did things under her nose. Of course, at the same time, she also disliked students who liked to report fake news and frame their classmates. It could only be said that Lu Rongrong had stepped on Teacher Yu's minefield. Teacher, I really did see the two of them passing notes. Lu Rongrong was unrepentant and even raised her voice to argue. Get out. Stand outside as punishment. Don't attend the 2 periods of self-study in the evening. You're not allowed to enter the classroom during this period. Teacher, you didn't have the patience to listen to Lu Rongrong's nonsense. She pointed at the door and growled at Lu Rongrong. Harmony was the most important thing in the class. Unity and mutual help were a good expression of the class atmosphere. However, Teacher Yu was naturally angry when Lu Rongrong randomly accused Qin Sini and Yun Jian of not paying attention in class. Lu Rongrong was so angry that she was about to explode. However, she didn't dare to do anything in front of the teacher. She shuffled out and glared fiercely at Yun Jian before she left. It was as if she was telling Yun Jian, "This is not over." Yun Jian returned a smile, but it only made Lu Rongrong angrier. Okay, continue with your self-study. Teacher Yu waved her hand and walked away. The first period of self-study was over. Lu Rongrong was still standing outside the door as punishment. Teacher Yu had returned to the office. Many students in the class were active outside the classroom, so there were not many people inside. Zhang Xiaofeng went to Yun Jian while he and Qin Sini looked at Yun Jian with admiration. It was Qin Sini who asked softly, Jian Jian, how did you manage to hide the note from the teacher's eyes? Oh, where did you hide the note? Zhang Xiaofeng looked at Yun Jian expectantly as well. That's teacher, that's is half. Spreading the note out in front of Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Xinyi, Yun Jian's lips curled into a smile. It's here. Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Xinyi were stunned by Yun Jian's action. It was then that both of them recalled the scene just now. When Yun Jian stood up to refute that she did not pass the note, she had scratched her head. Could it be that at that time she had hidden the note in her hair bun? At that time, she was actually able to hide the note in her hair in front of the whole class without leaving a trace. How did she do it? Could it be that she knew magic? Master, you're amazing. Zhang Xiaofeng's mouth was agape and it took him a long time to speak with admiration. Yun Jian, on the other hand, had a small smile on her face without saying anything. As a secret agent in her past life, she was the best at hiding all sorts of dangerous weapons all over her body. She could walk, run, jump, and other movements without being noticed. Back then she had hidden all sorts of razor blades in her hair. Including under her tongue, all over her body. As long as it could be hidden, there would be hidden weapons everywhere. Chapter 116. Haha. Lu Rongrong was so smug just now and wanted to complain about us to the teacher. She's the one who's suffering now. She's asking for trouble and reaping what she sowed. Qin Xinyi snickered happily and gave Yun Jian a thumbs up. My Jian Jian is the best. Yun Jian squinted and returned a smile. Looking at the lively and adorable Qin Xinyi, she was reminded of Lu Fian, who was still in Xinjiang town. Lu Fian was the first friend who treated her sincerely since her rebirth. She wondered if Lu Fian was doing well in Xinjiang town now. There was also the basketball team. They would meet again a year later. A week passed quickly. Yun Jian slept in class now. Due to her excellent results, the teachers did not bother with her. Perhaps when she had just been reborn a few days ago, she listened to the teacher in class without being distracted. Now, however, she could no longer listen attentively in class if she had to face the questions that she already knew with a youthful and hot-blooded attitude. When she returned home on Friday, Zhang Xiaofeng did not forget to remind Yun Jian, Master, let's meet at the foot of Longtu Mountain tomorrow night. Remember, it's 6 in the evening. Don't be late. 6 o'clock was the start of the tournament. Yun Jian nodded and left the school gate with a backpack slung over her shoulder. She was not going home. Instead, she was going for a walk in Longmen City suburbs. The evening sky was beautiful. The rosy clouds that reflected from the horizon cast a dim yellow hue over the land, like a girl who covered her face shyly, barely visible. Longmen City was a coastal city and its city was the closest to the sea. Walking past the rows of downtown, Yun Jian came to a tranquil shore. There was no beach here, but the waves that crashed on the shore gave her a sense of tranquility that came from the bottom of her heart. Yun Jian sat down along the shore and looked up at the yellow sky, deep in thought. Life was so good now. She was carefree and did not have to worry about being assassinated or facing the pressure of death at any moment. She did not know how long such peaceful days could last. But she knew that from tomorrow onwards, there would be another battle. The challenge tournament would be her new starting point in this circle. Smelling the warm and comfortable light of the evening, Yun Jian sat in the same place. She raised her hand and stretched, with a faint smile on her face. Suddenly, a fair and flawless hand grasped Yun Jian's wrist. Yun Jian was stunned. Someone was actually able to get close to her without her noticing? She glanced over and saw Siyi's sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and flawless cheeks. Why are you here? Yun Jian wanted to pull her wrist back from Siyi's warm hand, but she realized that his strength was not as strong as hers. Guess. Siyi's clear voice came out from his thin lips. He moved closer to Yun Jian and his exquisite face was even closer to hers. His breath was almost on Yun Jian's face. Siyi's large hand was still tightly grasping Yun Jian's small hand. Yun Jian's body shrank back. She had never been so intimate with a man before. She leaned back and tried even harder to break free. Siyi's large hand held onto her wrist firmly, causing Yun Jian to frown slightly. Let go first. Yun Jian used her other hand to push his large hand away. No. Siyi tightened his grip. Yun Jian's small hand was very smooth and delicate. It was even better than the tender skin of a newborn baby. Yun Jian pursed her red lips. She used her other hand to hit Siyi's head in an attempt to free his hand. However, Siyi did not let go. He held onto her wrist and tilted his head to the side to avoid her. At the same time, Yun Jian stretched out her leg to kick Siyi's leg. However, Yun Jian did not expect that Siyi would not let go. Instead, he pulled her into his embrace and the two of them rolled around the edge of the cliff. When they stopped, Siyi had one hand on Yun Jian's wrist and the other hand on Yun Jian's chest to guard against Yun Jian's attack. At this moment, it just so happened to be on Yun Jian's chest. On her chest. The two of them were also in a position where one of them was on top of the other. Neither of them had expected this to happen. Chapter 117. It was obvious that Siyi did not expect things to turn out this way. His earlobes flushed at the corners of his handsome face. Yun Jian's body had developed very well. Although she was only 15 years old, her twin peaks were already slender and elegant. He could clearly feel the softness of the young girl's ample bosom. Yun Jian's red lips widened. While Siyi was still in a daze, she smoothly pushed him away and stood up. Her heart skipped a beat, and an unknown feeling spread through her body. Yun Jian stood up and walked away. Having lived 2 lives, she was fearless in battle and could kill without being noticed. However, this was the first time she had encountered something like this. She had only taken 2 steps when Siyi's tall figure blocked Yun Jian's path. He tilted his head slightly, revealing his handsome face to Yun Jian. His earlobes turned red and he awkwardly said, "Ahem, sorry. I didn't do it on purpose." Yun Jian slowly came back to her senses. Her rosy cheeks were unnatural. In the next second, she pretended as though nothing had happened and said to Siyi, Why were you looking for me?" After interacting with him for the past few days, Yun Jian could confirm that Siyi was the kind of person who wouldn't visit a temple for no reason. If he didn't have anything to say, he wouldn't even waste his breath talking to you. Siyi didn't hesitate. He immediately knitted his good-looking brows and moved his thin lips. "Come with me." Yun Jian nodded. Thus Yun Jian followed Siyi to the side of the road. Siyi's personal Lamborghini was parked by the side of the road. Yun Jian sat in the passenger seat of the Lamborghini. Siyi took out a box from the back seat and handed it to Yun Jian. Yun Jian's eyes widened when she saw it, and her eyelashes fluttered twice. A sandalwood box. Siyi narrowed his eyes as he observed Yun Jian's every move. "You know about it?" Siyi asked suspiciously when he saw something strange in Yun Jian's eyes. Yun Jian was stunned. She turned her head and returned the sandalwood box to Siyi. She pretended as though this was the first time she had seen it. "What do I know? I just thought that this box was very pretty. I didn't react in time. This box must be very expensive, right?" She had almost exposed her emotions. The sandalwood box's influence on her was too great. This box was the cause of her rebirth. It was also the indirect cause of her brother's death. That was why she nearly lost control of her emotions when she saw the sandalwood box just now. But why did Siyi ask her such a question? Could it be that he could tell that she knew something about the sandalwood's way? Siyi narrowed his eyes. He stared at Yun Jian for a while before he finally looked away and pretended not to notice anything. To prevent Siyi from getting suspicious, Yun Jian asked him, "Hey, why are you asking me this?" Nothing." Siyi's eyes lit up. He pursed his lips and started the sports car. "I'll send you back." They didn't say a word until they reached home and returned to their respective rooms. However, it was obvious that both of them had their own thoughts. The next day was Saturday. As evening approached, Yun Jian left home on time after she tidied herself up. At 6 o'clock, she arrived at the foot of Longtu Mountain. From afar, she saw Zhang Xiaofeng standing on the spot and waving at her. When he saw Yun Jian walking over, Zhang Xiaofeng waved at her and shouted at Yun Jian, "Master, over here." Yun Jian stood there and nodded at Zhang Xiaofeng and Chen Sini. It was only then that she saw a group of boys and girls standing beside Zhang Xiaofeng. They were all around their age. "This is my master Yun Jian." Zhang Xiaofeng proudly introduced Yun Jian to the group of boys and girls. "Xiaofeng, are you kidding me? This girl is your master? Do you really want to have her as your master? You're a man, yet you want to have a girl as your master? I feel embarrassed for you." A self-proclaimed fashionable boy with dyed blonde hair standing beside Zhang Xiaofeng said. This person was Zhang Xiaofeng's friend from his circle. Chapter 118. After the boy with dyed blonde hair opened his mouth, the group of boys and girls around him laughed. They were obviously disdainful of Zhang Xiaofeng, a rich young master, having a weak little girl like Yun Jian as his master. "Shoo shoo shoo. Guheng, what do you know? My master is not an ordinary person." Zhang Xiaofeng waved his hand at Gu Heng and snorted. He was still on Yun Jian's side. Gu Heng? Yun Jian did not say anything. Even if this group of people were talking about her, she felt that there was no need to speak about unimportant things. But when she heard the two words Gu Heng, she could not help but take another look at the boy with dyed blonde hair called Gu Heng. Could it really be such a coincidence? This Gu Heng in front of her was Mayor Gu's grandson? Suddenly Yun Jian remembered Mayor Gu's warning that if she met his grandson, she must not be soft-hearted and teach him a lesson on his behalf. Combined with the fact that this Gu Heng had dyed blonde hair and was wearing a pair of ripped pants and a flowery dress that he thought was fashionable, Yun Jian felt relieved. So even Mayor Gu himself could not control his grandson's rebellious behavior? Boys and girls at this age had a very strong rebellious mentality. Yun Jian had lived in a dangerous environment in her previous life. Her only wish every day was to live until the next day. In that kind of environment she had never experienced the rebellious period that normal children should have. Your master is not a normal person. How could she be different? She doesn't have any more arms or legs than we do. What can she teach you? Gu Heng did not have any bad intentions. He just wanted to show off in front of the girls and show off his power. When Zhang Xiaofeng heard Gu Heng slandering his master, he immediately went against his brother, Gu Heng. The two of them clicked their tongues and only stopped arguing when it was almost time for the competition to start. The group of people rushed up the mountain noisily. As they rushed up the mountain, they could still hear Gu Heng's arrogant voice. My grandpa has some connections with Longmen City's mafia boss. I heard that the mafia boss has sent a very young woman to fight against a foreigner who almost made it into the international tournament tonight. Tonight's tournament will be very exciting. Gu Heng was at the front of the group, talking incessantly along the way. This group of boys and girls just happened to like listening to him talk about these things, and all of them listened with great interest. A very young woman fighting such a skilled foreigner. Doesn't that mean our mafia boss of Longmen City will lose for sure? A girl asked timidly. Hearing that someone had agreed with him, Gu Heng became even more pleased with himself. He spread the news that he had heard through the grapevine with a sense of superiority. It was as if he was the organizer and witness of this competition. Yun Jian, on the other hand, was slowly walking up the mountain side by side with Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini. Gu Heng and the rest did not know that snake lizard, who was supposed to fight the foreigner who was rumored to be very skilled, had already left. The one who replaced her was Yun Jian. However, Yun Jian did not feel anything when she heard Gu Heng and the rest chatter. She merely followed the group quietly and came to the mountainside of Longmen Mountain. We're here. It's here. Zhang Xiaofeng could not help shouting excitedly. Right in front of them, a circular building that looked like a huge football field came into view. Chapter 119. The only arena in Longmen City so far was set up here. Why was Longmen City's Longtu Mountain famous? This huge arena must have played a huge role. People who came to Longtu Mountain to train their bodies would definitely come to the arena to take a look and rest for a while at the mountainside. Of course, Longtu Mountain's scenery was beautiful and had a hint of nature to it. It was a pity that it was evening and they were at the mountainside of Longtu Mountain, so Yun Jian did not get to see the beautiful scenery. Instead, she saw many common flowers and plants along the way. Let's go in. It was not Zhang Xiaofeng's first time here, so he took the lead with a chuckle. Boys like Zhang Xiaofeng who paid special attention to fights often came to watch the arena matches. When they came to watch the matches, they did not forget to call the girls over. His purpose was naturally to show off in front of the girls and say a few professional words to show that he was knowledgeable. As expected, Yun Jian could hear Gu Heng's bragging and the girls' admiring voices along the way. Yun Jian merely rolled her eyes and smiled helplessly. There was a group of men standing at the entrance of the arena today, all of them dressed in black and looking solemn. This group of people gave off the feeling of gangsters in movies, making people shudder at the sight of them. Zhang Xiaofeng led the way to the arena, but he was stopped before he could enter. Everyone knew that today's challenge tournament was actually a bet between a mafia boss and a foreigner. Therefore, not just anyone could come and watch the battle. Xiaofeng, move aside. I'll do it. Gu Heng finally had some practical use now. He walked up and looked at the group of men in front of him with heavy expressions. He swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva and gave them a sideways glance. In an instant he regained his arrogance and said to them, I'm Mayor Gu's grandson. We're here to watch today's tournament. At Gu Heng's words, the wild-looking man in front of him stepped aside. The group entered the arena smoothly. Gu Heng breathed a sigh of relief and felt smug again. Wow, Gu Heng, you're amazing. You can even bring us in. I thought we wouldn't be able to come in. The girls began to boast about Gu Heng again. It made Gu Heng feel smug again. Jian, let's sit over there. Qin Sini held Yun Jian's hand and walked to an empty spectator stand. There were not many people on the spectator stand at the arena. There were people blocking the entrance. The bet today was not for ordinary people but for the mafia boss and a foreigner, so ordinary people could not enter. There was no lack of spectator stands, of course. Yun Jian and Qin Sini sat on the spectator stand. On the other side, Gu Heng was still busy bragging. He's a person. A mafia boss's man. Calm. Host. Oh, that's amazing. The crowd gasped again when they heard that. At that moment, the crowd saw the beautiful silhouette who was sitting next to Qin Sini on the spectator stand suddenly walk down the spectator stand. She walked straight to the middle-aged man whom they were talking about, the man whom the mafia boss valued the most. Hey, why is she going to that person? Does she know the mafia boss's underling? Chapter 120. Before Snake Lizard left, she said goodbye to Su Zetian. She directly asked Yun Jian to replace her in tonight's challenge tournament. When Su Zetian first heard the news, he was completely stunned, but in the end he acquiesced. After all, he had no right to refuse the decision made by the Kosha mercenaries' superiors. It was already good enough that the superiors sent someone to help him. Thinking about it from another angle, what if this thin and weak girl really had the ability to win for him? After all, the people sent by the Kosha mercenaries were not to be underestimated. Their strength was extraordinary. Yun Jian had met Su Zetian's subordinate before, so he naturally recognized her. Su Zetian's subordinate was called Duan Lei. Duan Lei was tall and strong with a strong physique. He was the second in command of Su Zetian's Dragon Head gang. Miss Yun. Duan Lei respectfully greeted Yun Jian the moment he saw her. Although Yun Jian was very young, Duan Lei was still very respectful to her. After all, if Yun Jian dared to participate in today's challenge tournament, it meant that she definitely had some skills. Yun Jian nodded indifferently, then said to Duan Lei in a low voice, "I'm with my friend. I'll come over when the challenge tournament starts." After that, Yun Jian turned and walked away. She only came over to greet him and tell him that she had arrived. On the other side, Gu Heng and the others looked at Yun Jian in surprise. They didn't hear the conversation between Yun Jian and Duan Lei, but even though they were far away, it wasn't difficult to see that Duan Lei was very respectful to Yun Jian. You know him? He's the underworld boss's underling. Gu Heng took over everyone's confusion and asked with a sideways glance. Yun Jian pursed her red lips and smiled without saying anything. She walked past the group of unreasonable people and walked towards Qin Sini. Tisif. Why is this girl acting so mysterious? Does she really think that she's a powerful person? Does she think that she's more powerful than the underworld boss? What kind of person is this? When a girl saw that Yun Jian had ignored Gu Heng and walked away, she couldn't help but shout loudly in order to flatter Gu Heng. She was secretly criticizing Yun Jian in her heart. When this girl was criticizing Yun Jian, her voice was especially loud, as if she was afraid that Yun Jian couldn't hear her. This shout was so loud that even Duan Lei, who was standing far away, could hear it. He couldn't help but frown, but he didn't say anything. The girl muttered a few words about Yun Jian, but when she saw that Yun Jian was too lazy to pay attention to her, she stopped talking. Yun Jian had already returned to the seat between Qin Sini and Zhang Xiaofeng and smiled at them. Gu Heng and the others also found a place to sit down, their faces brimming with youthful passion. It was obvious that today's challenge match was something that they were looking forward to, longing for, or even yearning for. After waiting for a long time, Yun Jian finally saw Duan Lei waving at her from afar. Understanding that the match was about to begin, she turned to Qin Sini and said, "I'm going to the washroom." She did not say that she was going up to fight. Although Qin Sini and the others would find out about it sooner or later, they would not believe her if she said it now. She might as well let them see it for themselves. The match is about to start. Jian, go quickly. Alright, do you know where the washroom is? Do you want me to bring you there? Qin Sini offered kindly. No need. Yun Jian shook her head with a grin, bearing a row of neat and pearly white teeth. She then hopped down from the spectator stand that wasn't too high and went around the ring to the backstage after a few steps. Chapter 121. As expected, the match began a few minutes later. Qin Sini and Zhang Xiaofeng looked anxious. Both of them were wondering why Yun Jian had not returned after going to the washroom for so long. The match was about to begin. At this moment, A tall and sturdy man walked out from the back of the arena. This man was bare-chested, and his broad shoulders and muscular arms seemed to be overbearing and powerful. He was at least 1.9 meters tall. If an ordinary person were to stand next to this man, it would be the difference between a giant and a dwarf. This man was one of the protagonists of the match, the foreigner who had made a bet with Su Zetian. His name was Shinji. Shinji was from country Y and was also a boxer in the country's national team. He was so strong that he almost made it into the international tournament. Of course it was almost. Even so, someone like Shinji could cause a stir in Longmen City even if he almost made it into the international tournament. Therefore, when Shinji entered the ring, the crowd was in an uproar. Everyone knew that it was a young woman who was representing Country Z to fight Shinji today. Looking at Shiniji's physique, did Country Z still have a chance of winning? Unless the woman was even more muscular than Shinji. Not only did the crowd think so, even Zhang Xiaofeng, Gu Heng and the rest thought so. Master, why did she go to the washroom for so long? Such an exciting match is about to begin. Cinny, why don't you go to the washroom and look for her? Zhang Xiaofeng turned to Qin Cinny looking anxious. In spite of it, Zhang Xiaofeng saw Qin Cinny looking at the ring with exaggerated shock. All of a sudden the surroundings fell silent. It was as if the sound was cut off midway. The place was so quiet that one could hear the sound of a pin dropping to the ground. Zhang Xiaofeng frowned suspiciously as he followed Qin Cinny's gaze to the ring. He seemed to have seen something as his pupils contracted and his eyes widened while his mouth formed an O shape. Looking at Gu Heng and the others, everyone present could only use one expression to describe them: shock. Following the crowd's gaze, they saw Yun Jian's long black hair swaying as she walked out from the backstage of the arena with light steps. She curled her lips and maintained a slightly leisurely expression from the beginning to the end. After a moment of dead silence, the atmosphere reached its climax. Oh my God! It was a little girl. Could it be that the person who's going to fight with that foreigner is just a little girl? Oh my God, did I see it wrong? The mafia boss actually let a little girl fight with a foreigner. Isn't he afraid of losing the bet? Look at the difference in height between the little girl and the foreigner. Do we really have a chance of winning this match? After a moment of silence, a storm of chatter resounded throughout the hall. Zhang Xiaofeng stood up from his seat in shock. He pointed at the girl with a faint smile on her face on the stage and gulped. He said in a half-surprised and half-delighted manner, "It's Master. It's Master. Could she be the woman Gu Heng was talking about who's going to fight with that foreigner tonight?" Zhang Xiaofeng had mixed feelings at that moment. He was worried for Yun Jian, but at the same time he felt a deep sense of pride because he was Yun Jian's disciple. In contrast, Gu Heng and the others looked like they had been constipated for a few days. Their faces were dark. Looking at the girl with a faint smile on her face on the stage, Gu Heng gulped again. So all the bragging that he had done to the crowd just now was like showing off in front of a big shot? In the arena, Shinji looked at Yun Jian's appearance. He put away the same shock in his heart and looked at Yun Jian with disdain. He then mocked Yun Jian in broken Chinese. "Is there no one else in Country Z? How dare you let a little girl fight with me? How can a girl with skinny arms and legs like her fight in the arena? Su Zetian is playing with me." Shiniji's arrogant and egotistical tone spread throughout the hall. Seeing this, everyone present was filled with anger as they looked at Shinji. Any native would lose their cool in the face of a foreigner's mockery. Chapter 122. Yun Jian's verbal rebuttal to Shinji made the audience cheer for Yun Jian. Even if Yun Jian could not win today's match, at least she represented everyone and used her words to rebuke Shinji. This resentment was returned to Shinji, who had looked down on the Z's people. Of course, with Shiniji's achievements and the advantage of his burly physique, the audience did not think that Yun Jian would win. "Little girl, you've successfully angered me." Shinji flew into a rage out of humiliation and said furiously. Then he stuck out his middle finger and pointed it at Yun Jian. His scornful, arrogant, and slightly provocative tone sent chills down everyone's spine. Shinji looked at Yun Jian and said angrily, "Little girl, since you insist on fighting in this ring, I, Shinji, will make sure you come in standing and go down lying down." He was definitely not speaking empty words. When the audience heard Shiniji's words, they could not help but shiver. The underground black market's arena matches were very cruel. No official referee would say something like stopping when it came to a fight. When two people fought in the arena, as long as they did not die, were seriously injured, or even completely paralyzed, no one would care. Even if the other party was really beaten to death, as long as the person had connections with the higher-ups, they could still get one foot in the police station and the other out of the police station. Who was Shinji? He was a member of Country-Wise's national arena team and someone who almost made it to the international arena. He was definitely capable. His sturdy muscles were not just for show. Yun Jian, on the other hand, had thin arms, a thin waist and thin legs. She was only about 1.6 meters tall and could not even be compared to Shinji, who was 1.9 meters tall. To put it simply, Shinji could probably crush a handful of Yun Jian with one hand. Obviously, Shinji's words were meant to severely injure Yun Jian during the match. After Zhang Xiaofeng and Chen Xinyi heard Shinji's words, they started to worry about Yun Jian. They quickly accepted that Yun Jian was the person who was going to fight with Shinji today, but they did not expect Yun Jian to win. After all, the difference in strength was obvious. However, Zhang Xiaofeng still gathered a few people to cheer for Yun Jian. Among them, Zhang Xiaofeng was the most enthusiastic. His hoarse shout spread throughout the arena. Master go! Master go! Yun Jian win! Yun Jian win! After Shinji said those harsh words to Yun Jian heard Zhang Xiaofeng's hoarse shout. Yun Jian pursed her lips. She did not look at Zhang Xiaofeng and the others. Instead, she looked at Shinji and stuck out her little finger at him. She smiled contemptuously and said, "I'll return the same words to you. Once you're in this arena, you'll have to leave lying down." This little girl was so frivolous. At that moment, this thought appeared in everyone's minds. Shinji was frivolous because of his achievements. However, why was Yun Jian so frivolous? Pfft. Shinji sneered at Yun Jian and said, "Then come on." The person who was hosting today's match was Duan Lei. However, even Duan Lei had to re-evaluate Yun Jian. He felt that this girl was not ordinary. However, he could not pinpoint exactly what was so special about her. There's no need to announce the start of the match. Just go up and finish it quickly. I'm always ready to deal with you. Yun Jian crossed her arms and looked at Shinji with raised eyebrows. Her words made Shinji so angry that he almost stomped his feet. Chapter 123. Good. I hope you can leave this place alive. Shinji snorted in a strange tone. He clenched his fists and his knuckles cracked. Everyone who heard the sound couldn't help but shudder. On the second floor of the arena, in the VIP seats, Su Ziqian frowned as he looked at the confident girl in the arena. This match was very important to him. That was why he asked the kosher mercenaries for help. Although Yun Jian was young and looked harmless, Su Ziqian knew very well that the people sent by the kosher mercenaries were all hiding their strength. Even a 7 or 8-year-old child from the kosher mercenaries could smile and look at you in the eye for 1 second. Then pull out a gun and kill your opponent in the next second. Who was rumored to be great and who almost made it into the international arena at the arena, could not even last a single move changed at this moment. Was this Yun Jian's strength? Was done with his words, Shinji, whose ribs were broken, widened his eyes. With a clench of his sturdy fist. He couldn't accept it. At that moment, he couldn't accept everyone held their breaths. This little girl defeated everyone him looked at the girl in the arena. That was impossible. Yun Jian stood on the spot, narrowed his reputation would be ruined from now on. Shinji used all his strength in his punch. He suddenly took out a hard object from his pocket. If she was really an ordinary girl, this punch would either kill or seriously injure her. Shinji was going to be ruthless. Going to kill someone. Oh my God, is that girl scared silly? At that moment, standing there, everyone who was shocked by Yun Jian's move suddenly screamed. Patty? Su Ziqian also stood up from his seat with a whoosh. At this moment. He held on to the railing. Everyone was already imagining the scene of Yun Jian being sent flying by the moment Shinji took out his gun. Some of the more timid girls closed their eyes and disappeared and was replaced by a cold and eerie smile. Yun Jian's grim voice sounded and emanated from Yun Jian. You're dead meat. Yun Jian's eyes suddenly changed and a faint smile spread from her lips. She said this to Shinji pull out his gun. Gu Hang and the others almost screamed. At that moment, the few girls who were with Gu Hang and were prejudiced against Yun Jian. They were all students in school and came from powerful families, and he swung his fist at Yun Jian. They heard a finger. But a shocking scene suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Their legs started to turn to jelly. Yun Jian, who had been standing still, heads and squatted on the ground, punch at a speed that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Zhang Xiaofeng twitched violently. Shinji didn't think that Yun Jian could dodge his attack at lightning speed. He wanted to rush forward. He was stunned for a few seconds. However, Gu Heng grabbed the corner of his shirt and scolded Shinji's weak crazy. On the battlefield, has a gun. A moment of stupor was fatal. My master is in danger. Yun Jian appeared behind Shinji and punched him in the ribs in the back. He was about to push Gu Heng away and run toward Yun Jian. His entire body. However, they suddenly saw fell to the ground with a bang. Yun Jian lifted her feet and slowly walked toward Shinji. And defeat had been decided in one move. The gun in Shinji's hand was still pointed in just a few seconds. Facing the black muzzle, she was not afraid at all. She defeated Shinji under an everyone's horrified gazes. She slowly walked toward Shinji. At that moment, Zhang Xiaofeng, Chen Xinyi, and everyone were all stunned. As Yun Jian walked, who was sitting in the VIP seats, was stunned. She pointed it at Shinji, who was lying on the ground with broken ribs, and sneered, "How dare you point a gun at me? You're dead." Shiniji's hand holding the gun was already trembling. Shinji was originally a boxer. He was not an assassin or a gangster. If he were to kill someone with a gun, he would not be able to do it as calmly as Yunjian. Another reason was that he was in Z country. After all, it was not his country's territory. If he killed Yunjian, Suzuchen would definitely not ignore it. In spite of it, Yunjian's words had obviously triggered Shinji further. Shinji howled on the spot. Thinking about the humiliation he had just suffered, his hand was about to pull the trigger. What everyone was thinking at this moment was, "It's over. Yunjian is definitely done for." Yunjian only had a knife in her hand. How could a knife be faster than a bullet? She also had to provoke Shinji into pulling the trigger when he was in an unstable mood. Was Yunjian courting death? "Go to hell." Shinji howled. He ignored the pain in his back and aimed his gun at Yunjian. However, just as Shiniji's finger was about to pull the trigger, a gleaming scimitar flew out from a distance. With astonishing speed and precision, the tip of the scimitar pointed downwards and cut the back of Shiniji's hand. Whoa! Shiniji's hand that was about to pull the trigger loosened, and the gun fell to the ground in a straight line. That scimitar was thrown out by Yunjian. Just as everyone present was still shocked that Yunjian's scimitar could cut the back of Shiniji's hand so accurately, Yunjian took 2 steps forward and rolled a few times on the ground. Almost in an instant, she flipped over and came in front of Shinji. Chapter 125. However, no matter how hard Shinji racked his brains, he would never categorize Yunjian as a secret agent or an assassin. After all, Yunjian's age was obvious. However, her skills didn't match her age. "Wait. Miss Yun, please wait," Duan Lei said as he rushed up to the stage and stopped Yunjian from killing Shinji. "Miss Yun, please spare Shiniji's life for the sake of our boss." Having witnessed what Yunjian was capable of, Duan Lei felt genuine respect for her as he spoke to her hastily. Although Shinji deserved to die, he was a member of Country Y's national arena team. Killing him was equivalent to killing a key figure that Country Y had groomed. Naturally, Country Y's people would not let it go. This was no longer a matter of personal grudges. It would lead to a bloody battle and the consequences would be severe. "You want me to let him go?" Yunjian raised her eyebrows as she held the pistol and patted the black muzzle on Shiniji's face twice. Faced with the young lady's questioning, Duan Lei could not help but gulp. Finally, he mustered up his courage and nodded. "Yes. Sure." Yunjian's casual words made everyone present heave a sigh of relief. After all, this was a competition. Shiniji's drawing of a pistol was enough to make everyone afraid. If Yunjian were to kill someone in public, many people present would probably lose sleep for several nights. At that moment, Yunjian's eyes suddenly sharpened. She lifted her foot from Shiniji's back and took 2 steps back to stabilize herself. Then she said to Duan Lei, "I can let him go." At that point, even Shinji, who was lying on the ground and starting to feel dizzy, breathed a sigh of relief. The one thing he regretted the most was underestimating Yunjian. "Don't mess with her." "But his hand, I want it." Yunjian's casual words were suddenly heard in the next second. What followed was the crisp sound of a gunshot. Bang, bang. The gunshot sounded and the gun fell. 2 bullets pierced through Shiniji's wrist and into his bone marrow. Shinji howled in pain. When the bullet entered his hand, it was as if it had penetrated a piece of wood, piercing his liver and spleen. The screams came from the spectators' seats. Spear. Yunjian actually fired the gun. Compared to some timid girls, Zhang Xiaofeng and the others were full of passion. Although they were also afraid, they couldn't help but admire Yunjian from the bottom of their hearts. Everyone present had seen Shiniji's previous attitude. Shinji had not only ridiculed Yunjian, but more importantly, he had ridiculed Country Z. He had ridiculed their country. Just based on this point alone, even if Shinji died 10,000 times, it wouldn't be enough to appease the hatred in their hearts. Looking at his wrists that were shot by the pistol, Shinji fainted. Yunjian's 2 shots not only crushed Shiniji's dignity, but also ended his career as a boxer. Because Shiniji's meridians were broken, it was equivalent to his hands being crippled. The most basic requirement for a boxer was to have a pair of strong hands. After Yunjian fired the shot, she threw the pistol to Duan Lei and said, "Tell your boss that I've won the match." After she finished speaking, she turned around and walked out of the ring. Duan Lei hurriedly caught the pistol that Yunjian had thrown to him. He swallowed his saliva and turned around to clean up the mess. Seeing that the match had ended, the protagonist, Yun Jian, also walked out. Zhang Xiaofeng and the others hurriedly ran out after her. Chapter 126. Before Yun Jian could step out of the arena, Zhang Xiaofeng's urgent voice came from behind her. Master, master. Master, wait for us. She turned around and looked up at them with a faint smile. The arena is over. It's dark now. It's time to go home. Zhang Xiaofeng and the rest, who were running up behind her, could not help but be speechless. They muttered in their hearts, shouldn't you explain something? Master, what happened just now? Why did you fight with that foreigner? Also, your posture just now was so cool. By the way, how did you throw the knife out just now? That move was so powerful. It was like a living version of Xiao Li's flying knife. Zhang Xiaofeng's words were fired like a machine gun. Stop, Yun Jian ordered. This voice shut Zhang Xiaofeng up on the spot. He did not say anything else. How am I supposed to answer you with so many questions at once? Yun Jian raised her beautiful eyebrows and smiled shyly like a young girl. At this moment, Yun Jian seemed to have turned into a fresh and beautiful young girl. It was as if the young girl who was dismissive of Shiniji just now did not exist at all. Then we'll answer them one by one. Master, why were you the one who fought with that foreigner just now? Also, why didn't you tell us this earlier? Zhang Xiaofeng asked the question that everyone wanted to know. Pairs of black eyes stared at Yun Jian in unison. Yun Jian pursed her lips and finally opened her mouth. She reached out and snapped her fingers in the air. Then she pursed her lips at Zhang Xiaofeng and smiled mysteriously. Take a guess. After that, she turned around and did not intend to explain further. However, what Yun Jian did not expect was that Zhang Xiaofeng and the rest would follow closely behind her, begging her to teach them the domineering moves just now. Even Gu Heng followed closely behind Yun Jian. He even apologized to Yun Jian for his previous actions. This caused Zhang Xiaofeng to brag to Gu Heng and the others somewhat childishly, "This is my master." Yun Jian finally got rid of Zhang Xiaofeng and the group of people who were chasing her to get to the bottom of things. She set foot on the road home. It was chilly at night, especially when it was close to winter and autumn. The weather changed quickly, and the temperature difference between day and night was large. Yun Jian was wearing a jacket today, but she still felt a little cold. As they walked past a street lamp, a sports car drove past them and stopped beside Yun Jian. Yun Jian had not expected the car to stop. She pulled her jacket around herself and turned around. Coincidentally, she saw Ce sitting in the Lamborghini looking at her. He tilted his head, and his chiseled features became clearer under the street lights. Get in the car, Ce spat out 2 words from his beautiful thin lips. Yun Jian did not stand on ceremony. Chapter 127. Country M, New York. New York was located in the southeastern part of Country M along the Atlantic Ocean. It was Country M's largest city and largest port. It was a world-class international metropolis. Ce's private jet flew over New York's airspace and finally landed in an empty space at an airport. Because it was a private jet, there was no need to transfer planes in between. Thus, the flight took less than 10 hours. Due to the time difference between Country Z and Country M, it was around 6 o'clock in the morning in Country Z. However, it was already 6 o'clock in the evening in Country M. It was also dinner time. Yun Jian took a nap on the plane. This was the first time she had slept so soundly since her rebirth. When she woke up, the plane had already landed on land. Yun Jian rubbed her eyes and got up from the soft cushion. She stretched and suddenly felt that something was amiss. Cushion? She turned her head and was surprised to find that she had fallen asleep leaning on Ce's lap. What was going on? She remembered that after she boarded the private jet, Ce did not explain the situation to her. She looked at the scenery outside the window and gradually fell asleep. However, she had clearly chosen a soft cushion to fall asleep on the plane. Why was her head lying on Ce's lap when she woke up? Could it be that he had moved her head to his lap? Yun Jian pursed her lips slightly when she thought of this. Even if he had moved her head from the cushion to his lap, why didn't she feel anything at all? This shouldn't be the case. How could she let down her usual guard and fall asleep peacefully without any fear? You're awake. Ce's hoarse and magnetic voice sounded from above her head. Yun Jian looked up and saw Ce's handsome face turn to the side. His fair and slender fingers were scratching his messy short black hair. His earlobes were slightly red. Yun Jian swallowed her saliva and pursed her lips to reveal a stiff smile. Have we arrived? Yes. Ce nodded. He stretched out his slender fingers and opened the door of the plane. He turned sideways and jumped out first. Yun Jian bent over and also jumped out of the cabin door. After Yun Jian landed on the ground, Si Yi grabbed her little hand and walked towards the street. Yun Jian was stunned by Si Yi's actions. She wanted to shake off his hand, but found that he was not as strong as her. This was also the first time she had encountered such a situation. She immediately blushed and lowered her head. Don't look at how Yun Jian could kill people so easily. Even if she saw erotic scenes in her previous life, she could still do it without blushing. However, he felt that Si Yi was different from everyone else. She couldn't describe how she felt. The banquets of the upper class usually started at around 8 o'clock, which meant that there was still some time left. Si Yi smiled beautifully as he held Yun Jian's warm little hand and walked towards one of the top clothing stores in New York. This clothing store was owned by a world-class fashion designer in New York. Usually it received very few customers. However, the customers it received were all world-class bigwigs. As Si Yi held Yun Jian's little hand and walked into the store, Yun Jian saw two men in their 20s walking towards her. When the two men saw Si Yi and Yun Jian holding hands, they couldn't help but be stunned. Then they walked in front of Si Yi and lowered their heads. "Young master, the dress is ready." Yun Jian was also stunned when she saw the two men. They were the two men who had been standing on either side of Si Yi when she had first met Si Yi. Chapter 128. Si Yi nodded slightly. He pulled Yun Jian past the two men and walked towards the changing room. The two men were left dumbfounded. F***CK, is the young master enlightened? He's even learned how to hold a woman's hand. One of the men rubbed his hands, a trace of surprise appearing on his handsome face. He couldn't hold it in any longer and said to the other man, "Adam, the young master's matters aren't something you and I can casually discuss. Do your job well." The other man, who looked more composed, reminded him before turning to leave. The man called Adam stood there and clicked his tongue twice. He muttered to the more composed man, "Go, go, go, you're the most serious one." Si Yi had a custom-made lace evening gown for Yun Jian. It was pure black and not revealing at all. This evening gown was designed by the world's top fashion designer and was one of a kind in the world. Its economic value couldn't be measured by money. After Yun Jian changed and came out, she saw that Si Yi had already changed into a formal suit. Si Yi's foundation was very good. His handsome face was flawless, his tall nose bridge and deep eyes exuded the aura of a king. The black suit clung to his muscular skin. When Yun Jian came out, Si Yi's fair and slender fingers tugged at the tie of his suit. From the side, he looked like a still and untainted figure in a painting. He was so handsome and delicate that there was nothing to nitpick about him. Even though Yun Jian had seen many handsome and delicate men in her previous life, none of them could compare to the one in front of her. She was stunned for a few seconds. "What's wrong?" Yun Jian only reacted when she heard a pleasant male voice. Si Yi narrowed his eyes as he sized up the young lady in the black lace evening gown. Every time he met Yun Jian's eyes, he would suppress his distant feelings towards women and wanted to take a step closer to her. When he first discovered this, even he couldn't believe it. He knew himself very well. He hated women. Ever since he was young, as long as there were women around, he would feel nauseous. If a woman came close to him, he would feel extremely disgusted. This is a quirk. But it was different for Yun Jian. He could feel it deeply. Yun Jian's petite figure kept floating in front of him. That faint milky fragrance lingered at the tip of his nose, making him feel a little different. That was why he couldn't help but get close to her, and even hold her hand. Therefore, when Si Yi saw Yun Jian's smooth and tender arms, the lace gown that accentuated her petite figure, and her well-developed twin peaks, he couldn't help but gulp. "Let's go." Yun Jian moved her red lips and walked out directly. Si Yi paused for a moment as the girl's fragrance dissipated into the distance. Then he strode after her. Country M, New York, the 39th floor of the Triangle Building. In the middle of the room, a dignified and imposing middle-aged man in his 40s was holding a glass of red wine and chatting amicably with a man of the same age in front of him. This dignified middle-aged man was called Si Chu. He was the head of the armaments family, Cold Pavilion. Without a doubt, he was also Si Yi's biological father. At this moment, Si Chu was chatting happily with the middle-aged man opposite him. Chapter 129. Si Chu followed the middle-aged man's gaze and saw a 17 or 18-year-old girl standing there. She was pretty and had an outstanding temperament among the group. Of course, as the leader of the arms family, Si Chu did not care about the appearance of his future daughter-in-law. He cared about the marriage between the big families and the friendly relationship between the big families. He nodded at the middle-aged man and praised hypocritically, "Old Shi, your daughter is not bad. She has a good temperament." This was Si Chu's highest compliment. He patted the man's shoulder as he spoke. Shi Chuan's face lit up. He moved closer to Si Chu and smiled. "Then about the marriage between Ce and my daughter? Of course it's a done deal." Si Chu replied with a laugh and an absolute tone. Shi Chuan smiled and lowered his voice to ask Si Chu, "Then, does Ce agree to this marriage? How can he not agree to this kind of thing? I'm his father. Can't I make the decision for such a small matter?" Speaking of this, Si Chu suddenly felt as if he had been hit on the trigger point. He said angrily. Speaking of his son, he really could not control him. However, he would never lower his head in front of outsiders. Naturally, he had to put on a "I'm the father, I make the decision" attitude. Hearing Si Chu's affirmative tone, Shi Chuan seemed to be relieved. At this moment, a man walked over and whispered in Si Chu's ear. Si Chu immediately reacted and moved his old face closer to Shi Chuan. He smiled and said, "My son is here. Hurry up and ask your daughter to come over. Let the two of them meet." Shi Chuan was happy when he heard this. He hurriedly waved at his daughter, Shi Laixiang. Shi Laixiang had been waiting there for a long time. When she saw her father waving at her, she hurriedly ran over. Her heart was filled with joy and nervousness like a young girl. She had met Ce a year ago and fell in love with him at first sight. The young man's handsome face kept appearing in her mind and she could not get it out of her mind. Although they were far apart, ever since they met, she swore that she would marry him. On the other hand, the Shi family and the Si family were both military families, and the two families had a mutual interest. The upper-class aristocratic families usually liked to unite their families through marriage to strengthen the trust between them. Although it was the modern era, these old customs could not be changed. Beep. The only elevator beside the banquet hall opened. Shi Laixiang stood beside her father, Shi Chuan. Her entire body was tense. She even ran her fingers through a few strands of her hair, afraid that her imperfections would be exposed. Only she knew the nervousness in her heart when she saw the person she missed dearly. The moment the elevator doors opened, however, what everyone saw was Ce, who was perfect to the extreme. As well as the petite girl standing beside him, who was also extremely beautiful. The young girl was wearing a lace gown that outlined her petite figure. Her curvaceous figure was revealed in front of everyone. She was beautiful and elegant. When the two of them stood together, it was as if they were a match made in heaven. They were actually so compatible. Si Chu, Shi Chuan, and Shi Laixiang were dumbfounded. Not only the three of them, but everyone present was mesmerized by Ce and Yun Jian's stunning appearance. They were unable to extricate themselves. Ce held Yun Jian's small hand and walked out of the elevator step by step. They stood in front of everyone. Yun Jian realized that Ce had only glanced at Si Chu when he walked in front of him. Without saying a word, he pulled her to the side. "Damn brat, stop right there. What kind of attitude is this? How can you leave without saying a word when you see me? Where is your upbringing? If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you were a bastard with a mother but no father. Also, who is this girl beside you?" Si Chu felt that he had lost face and spoke to Ce angrily. Ce turned his head to look at Si Chu. He held Yun Jian's hand tightly and said coldly to Si Chu, "My mother is already dead. That woman is not my mother." When he said this, Yun Jian could clearly feel the coldness and loneliness in Ce's voice. Chapter 130. When Yun Jian heard Ce's words, she was shocked. But when she scanned the room and saw Shi Laixiang, who was standing not far away from Si Chu, she suddenly understood. This woman was the fiancée Ce's father had arranged for Ce, right? This banquet was probably used by Ce's father to announce Ce and Shi Laixiang's engagement. It wasn't strange for upper-class families to use marriage to consolidate their interests. Yun Jian smiled. It seemed like Ce wasn't satisfied with this arranged marriage and was planning to use her as an excuse. Ce's attitude towards her was quite good, so she would naturally help her. Nonsense. Nonsense. It's fine if you usually make a fuss, but today you even found a woman? Are you trying to anger me to death? Si Chu flew into a rage. When Ce mentioned that his mother was already dead, Si Chu felt like he had been exposed in a scandal as he shuddered in rage. Si Chu was the head of the Cold Court, an armaments aristocratic family. After he married Ce's mother, he divorced Ce's mother in order to expand the Cold Court's power and influence. He then married the daughter of another armaments aristocratic family. At the same time, Si Chu also forced Si Yi's mother to stay by his side. In the end, Si Yi's mother became depressed and committed suicide due to depression. Today, in order to consolidate his position in the cold court, Si Chu planned to use Si Yi's marriage to form a marriage alliance with the Shi family. But he didn't expect that Si Yi would have such a huge reaction. He even found a woman to humiliate him in public. This made Si Chu, an internationally renowned armaments tycoon, completely furious. "Brother Si Yi, it's wrong of you to do this. Don't make uncle angry." Shi Laixiang looked at Yun Jian's and Si Yi's intertwined hands. She dug her fingertips into her skin and played the role of the good guy. She spoke coyly to Si Yi in a gentle voice. "What are you? What does my business have to do with you?" Si Yi cast a sidelong glance at Shi Laixiang, not giving her any face at all. Shi Laixiang had originally planned to speak up after Si Chu had spoken. This way she could improve her image in front of Si Chu and let Si Yi see her gentle side and have a good impression of her. But who would have thought that Si Yi wouldn't give her any face at all? She looked at Yun Jian, who was standing next to Si Yi, and she became even angrier. Her eyes turned red because the person she had been longing for had said such things to her. Si Chu felt humiliated at once. He knew that he couldn't control his son, so he pointed at Yun Jian and threatened her. "Which family's young lady are you from? Rong family? Wen family? Fong family? I don't care which family's young lady you're from. Get out of here now or your family will disappear from the international stage forever because of you." The aristocratic families that Si Chu had pointed out were all internationally renowned big shots. It was obvious that he thought that Yun Jian was a young lady from one of these aristocratic families. Yun Jian was amused when she heard that. She narrowed her eyes and met Si Chu's murderous gaze fearlessly in front of everyone. Her red lips curled up. "I'm a young lady from the Yun family. Let me introduce myself. My name is Yun Jian. I live in Country Z's Longmen City. My mom is a waitress at a hotel. Country Z's Longmen City. A waitress at a hotel." Everyone latched on to these words. Si Chu stomped his feet, almost vomiting blood from anger. He thought that the woman his son had found would be a socialite of the upper class even if she wasn't from an aristocratic family. Chapter 131. Si Chu was furious. He did not threaten Yun Jian anymore. Instead, he waved his hand and called for his bodyguards, intending to chase her out. Someone chase her out. If Yun Jian was a young lady from an aristocratic family, Si Chu might have given her some face. However, Yun Jian had said it herself. She was just a person with no status. Si Chu was naturally fearless and prepared to chase her out on the spot. He had lost all his face today. There was a saying that one should not wash one's dirty linen in public. However, after today's incident, he had no face left. A few bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses surrounded Yun Jian and Si Yi. "I'll see who dares to touch my people." Si Yi sneered. He calmly pulled out a pistol from the holster at his waist, pulled the trigger and pointed it at Si Chu. Si Yi had already decided to shed all pretense of cordiality. Ever since Si Yi could remember, he had never acknowledged Si Chu as his father. He had not even called him dad for so many years. In his impression, this so-called father was the murderer who had directly forced his mother to commit suicide. He could still remember that his mother had committed suicide due to depression. Si Chu had always locked his mother up and kept her at home in the name of love. Later, his mother had suffered from depression and was not allowed to seek treatment. Si Chu was a person who cared about his reputation. He did not allow outsiders to know about his family's dirty linen. Hence, when Si Yi's mother had suffered from depression, he was not allowed to seek treatment. Hence, Si Yi's mother had been too depressed and could not bear the torture of her illness. Hence, she committed suicide. Furthermore, she had died in front of Si Yi, who was only 5 years old at the time. He still could not forget the bloody corpse of his mother. At that time he was just a child. Since then he had developed an extreme sense of disgust and alienation toward all women. It had been the same for 19 years. It was not until he met Yun Jian that he realized that she was different from other girls and women. He did not hate Yun Jian. On the contrary, he had a different feeling towards her. "Bastard! Are you going to kill your father for this woman?" Si Chu was so angry that his hands were trembling. Back then, he had divorced Si Yi's mother and married the daughter of another aristocratic family for the sake of expanding Cold Pavilion's influence. Today, the Cold Court had become the vanguard of the world's military families, but his most beloved son had turned against him. He had only loved one woman all these years, and that was Si Yi's mother. but for the sake of so-called face and power he gave up these feelings of love. He had countless mistresses in his life, and it wasn't that he didn't have any other sons or daughters. However, Ce was the only one he had chosen as the successor of the Cold Court. In Si Chu's heart, everything he did was for Ce. But what about him? He actually wanted to kill him for a woman. Si Chu felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. Shi Laixiang stood at the side and watched as Ce pulled out his gun. She was both in love and afraid of his handsome posture. She swore in her heart that she must get this man. As for Yun Jian, in everyone's eyes, she was just an insignificant person. Without Ce, she was nothing. Beep. At this moment, the elevator door opened again. A woman with a tight figure walked out of the elevator side by side with a man in his 20s in a blue floor-length evening gown. A group of people followed behind the woman and the man. Of course, they weren't ordinary people. On the contrary, they were full of vigor. Even Si Chu couldn't help but take a second look when he saw these people. When he saw the leader of the group of people, a woman in a blue evening gown, he was shocked. The woman's exposed left wrist was imprinted with a skull symbol. A skull symbol on her wrist was the symbol of the Wuxia mercenaries. This woman was actually a member of the Wuxia mercenaries. As for the man beside the woman, there was a large scar on his neck. It looked as if it had been cut by a knife, and it made people shiver. Seeing this, Si Chu couldn't help but gulp. If he guessed correctly, this man was in a cooperative relationship with the Wuxia mercenaries. He was one of the 4 leaders of the underground assassin organization, the Inhun organization Shuang. If the name of the Wuxia mercenaries made people shiver, then the Inhun organization was a hellish existence. Countless international assassins and secret agents were from the Inhun organization. Chapter 132. Yun Jian was the king of secret agents in her previous life, the world's top secret agent, slaying God. She was indeed a secret agent trained by the world's top underground assassin organization, Inhun Group. Of course, Inhun's underlings could not control her due to her extraordinary capability in her previous life. Slaying God was the only secret agent in Inhun's history to successfully break free from the organization's control. At the same time, she started killing at the age of 12 and left Inhun Group when she was 14. In the same year, she killed the previous boss of Wuxia mercenaries and developed her own force. Therefore, the king of secret agents, slaying God, was known as a legend in the underworld. The only one who could be mentioned in the same breath as the king of secret agents, slaying God, was the leader of Inhun Group. The leader of Inhun Group was a mystery. No one had ever seen him, not even knowing if he was a man or a woman, old or young. The only ones who had seen the leader of Inhun Group were the 4 leaders of the organization. Shuang was one of them. As for the Wuxia mercenaries' forces, there was no need to mention them. Inhun Group and Wuxia mercenaries were 2 major organizations that monopolized the entire underground organization. Even Si Chu, the master of Cold Pavilion, a military family, had to lower his head in fear when he saw people from these 2 major assassin organizations. When Si Chu saw the woman in a beautiful blue evening gown and the man with a huge scar on his neck, his legs turned to jelly. He could not care less about his son, Ce, as he hurried to greet them. His smile was stiff, but it was forced as he extended his hand to shake their hands. What a rare guest. We welcome both of you to attend tonight's banquet. Si Chu was the one who had arranged the banquet. His goal was to arrange a marriage between his son and Shi Richuan's daughter. He did not expect the Wuxia mercenaries and Inhun Group to be here, so he was so embarrassed that his face was about to burst. However, the woman in the blue evening gown walked past Si Chu and went straight to Yun Jian, ignoring his goodwill. She stood in front of Yun Jian and greeted respectfully, "Sister Jian." The woman in the blue evening gown was obviously Snake Lizard, who had changed into the black robe that covered her entire body to reveal her sexy figure. The 2 words Snake Lizard caused everyone present to suck in a deep breath. Most of the people there were businessmen and politicians from prominent families and families. The biggest symbol of Wuxia mercenaries was the skull mark on their wrists. It was a mark that could not be imitated by outsiders. Someone who could make Wuxia mercenaries stand in front of her and greet her as Sister Jian respectfully was a rare sight. How could this girl, who claimed to be from a small town in Z country and whose mother was an ordinary hotel attendant, be an ordinary person? Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. She was related to Wuxia mercenaries? Yun Jian nodded slightly at Snake Lizard. She did not expect to meet Snake Lizard here. Snake Lizard had kept a low profile when she returned to Longmen City the last time. She was dressed very tightly so the skull mark on her wrists was not exposed. Today Snake Lizard had changed into a blue evening gown. Her enchanting female body was faintly discernible. At the same time, the skull mark on her wrist was also intimidating. The girl in front of him was related to Kosha mercenaries? More importantly, the Kosha mercenaries who did not even care about Si Chu was calling Yun Jian, Sister Jian, respectfully. What did this mean? Si Chu started to twitch. Shi Laixiang was annoyed when she saw everyone's attention on Yun Jian. Chapter 133. When Shi Laixiang said this, she even shook Shi Yichuan's hand and acted like a spoiled child. However, Shi Laixiang's words attracted everyone's attention. Let the internationally famous assassin organization that kills without blinking an eye be polite? This Shi Laixiang must be stupid. Was she that lucky? Everyone snorted, but in front of Yun Jian and the others, no one dared to say anything for fear of implicating themselves. When Shi Yichuan heard his daughter say this, he was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He lowered his voice and shouted at Shi Laixiang, "Xiang, shut up." Unexpectedly, Shi Laixiang did not notice the change in the atmosphere at all. She shouted even more confidently, "Dad, they were in the wrong. They were rude. That's what you've always taught us. We have to be polite. Those who don't have manners are a bunch of lowly and uncultured people. These kinds of people will never be able to show their faces." Shi Laixiang's words were clear and logical. Even she felt that it was reasonable. When Shi Yichuan heard his daughter's words, he was so scared that he almost turned into a puddle of water. Of course, he could tell that his daughter was scolding Yun Jian in a roundabout way. "Shi Laixiang, shut your mouth." Shi Yichuan's trembling finger pointed fiercely at his daughter, even roaring out her full name. However, he could not explain it to his daughter now. If they went against the Kosha mercenaries, the Shi family would probably be wiped out. Because the Kosha mercenaries was an organization made up of international elite assassins, their hands were stained with countless blood. They were so powerful that they were intimidating and terrifying. Simply put, the Kosha mercenaries could wipe out the Shi family effortlessly. "Dad, you're yelling at me again." Shi Laixiang felt even more wronged. At the same time, she felt even more indignant that Yun Jian had stolen her limelight at the banquet. Yun Jian naturally heard the conversation between Shi Laixiang and Shi Yichuan. She curled her lips and glanced over, but she did not say anything. She did not care about Shi Laixiang's words at all. She had seen many people like Shi Laixiang in her past life. If she killed Shi Laixiang just because of one sentence, then there would be too many people in this world who would want to kill her. Of course, if Shi Laixiang made any further moves, she would definitely make her regret being born. Si Chu was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. It was too late for regrets. He never thought that Yun Jian could make the Kosha mercenaries bow down to her. As soon as he thought of what he had just said to Yun Jian and what he was going to do, he felt his hair stand on end. "Miss Yun, we were blind just now and said something wrong. I hope you won't take it to heart." Si Chu was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. His attitude towards Yun Jian had changed completely. Si Yi's sword-like eyebrows flashed. He stood beside Yun Jian and smiled at her. He sneered at Si Chu's attitude. At the same time, he exchanged glances with Shuiying, who was standing not far away. "What if I insist on taking it to heart?" Yun Jian glanced at Si Chu and smiled evilly. It made people's hearts tremble. Si Chu's heart thumped and he was sweating profusely. After all, he had been working for many years and had experienced many big situations. He hurriedly smoothed things over and pretended to be calm. "Miss Yun's temperament is extraordinary. One look and I can tell that you are a magnanimous person. Of course you won't take it to heart." This sentence made it clear. If Yun Jian took it to heart, then she would appear to be narrow-minded. Yun Jian smiled sweetly. She pursed her lips and followed Si Chu's words. "Of course I won't take it to heart." Pausing for a moment, she curled her lips again. "But I'm very unhappy. I want something from you." "What is it?" Si Chu and Shi Yichuan heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 134. Since when did he become a thing? Si Yi's twinkling eyes narrowed, the corners of his lips curling upwards. However, after hearing Yun Jian's words, he felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. In contrast to Si Yi, Si Chu, Shi Yichuan, and Shi Laixiang's faces darkened. Si Chu and Shi Yichuan had intended to get close to each other by marrying their children, but after Yun Jian's words, both of them turned pale. Shi Laixiang was even paler. When she looked at Yun Jian again, she wanted nothing more than to tear her into pieces. Si Chu and Shurichuan knew that if they became enemies with the kosher mercenaries because of this, both of their families would be removed from the international scene. Shurichuan, on the other hand, was afraid that his precious daughter would cause more trouble if he stayed any longer, so he made up a random excuse and left the banquet in a hurry. Cough, since you and you are truly in love, then I shouldn't break you up. Si Chu tried to smooth things over. Today's matter was unexpected, but even so, a sly old fox like Si Chu could quickly minimize the impact of this matter on him. Moreover, it was uncertain whether his son, Ce, would still be together with Yun Jian when the time came. It wasn't too late to bring up this matter after today. When she heard Si Chu say, "truly in love," Yun Jian's eyelids twitched and she blinked. The banquet finally came to an end. Snake. Lizard left the banquet hall to attend to her own matters. Yun Jian walked side by side with Ce. Suddenly she reached out and poked Ce's arm, winking mischievously as she teased, "I even sacrificed my reputation to help you just now. You should at least thank me." Those who knew Yun Jian well knew that she didn't joke often. This was a rare occasion when Yun Jian was in the mood to joke with Ce. "I never thank people." Ce looked at Yun Jian playfully. Suddenly her eyes became sharp and her deep eyes lit up under the street lights. "But," he paused and looked at Yun Jian from head to toe, "you can repay me with your body." Yun Jian was completely dumbfounded. She never thought that the usually cold and arrogant Ce would have such a playboy side. However, before she could think any further, a man in his 20s suddenly walked out from the darkness. The long scar on the man's neck left a deep impression. The person who came was Shuang. Shuang saw that Yun Jian was also here. He paused for a moment but still went up to Ce and said, "Young master." Yun Jian was stunned. She knew very well that Shuang was one of the 4 leaders of the Inhun organization. This was because she was an agent trained by the Inhun organization in her previous life. "He's one of your men?" Yun Jian asked the question that was bothering her. Ce did not hide it at all as he answered, "Yes." Yun Jian did not ask further after that. "There's no outsider here. Just say it." Ce glanced at Shuang from the corner of his eyes. Ce's words implied that Yun Jian was not an outsider. Shuang nodded and said, "There's a change in the organization." Ce could already tell what had happened from the 5 words. He turned to look at Yun Jian, his handsome face tilted slightly to show her an exquisite outline. "I have something to do. Looks like I can't go back to Longmen City with you. You go back first." For some reason, when Yun Jian heard what he said, it felt like there was something going on between them. Her cheeks heated as she nodded slightly. Ce then sent Yun Jian to his private jet considerately before leaving with Shuang. The private jet took off immediately. As they were more familiar with the journey back, it only took them 8 hours to return to Country Z. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.